Okay, do-badders, so this is a really interesting one this week. We don't normally have do-badders on as a general rule because, well, let's face it, their achievements aren't usually things to shout about. In fact, lack of achievement is very much a theme. But unfortunately, recently, we have had a glut of success, and we're all kind of quite flushed with it, we're all quite surprised by it. And so we thought it's worth actually bringing on two individuals who are very well known in the do-badder community who have decided to break the mould and start setting a precedent of winning things, which we're all very, very disappointed with. But we thought this is an absolutely perfect opportunity to bring them on, to find out what their secrets were in doing so. And as I mentioned to them before, being able to bring them on, it also allows us to have one of the most clickbaity titles that we've ever had. And I'm not saying that just because we wanted that title. We wanted you on because we genuinely wanted it. So, welcome to the podcast, Lorna, Spayne, and Richard McDowell. Hooray!
Hooray!
I don't think that was enthusiastic enough. Can you do that again, please?
Hooray!
Yeah, there we go. That's perfect. But this is going to be very unusual for a lot of do-badders. So unless someone is in the BBR Bad Boy Running Club, they are unlikely to have heard your voice on the podcast, Lorna.
That's very true, but everybody that is in the club, I think, is thoroughly sick of it by now. As I am myself. I never thought that I would be so comprehensively all over the internet. I sort of put my work into setting up the club a little bit and then thought that I would melt into the background and not have to do anything ever again, as committees tend to do.
And you've gone in the opposite direction, broadcasting more regularly than David and I, with your own production setup, which it seems.
Yeah, I've got my own little production. It's quite terrible, actually, because it involves a level of organisation that I do not possess, and therefore I go out weekly with absolutely nothing to say, and then proceed to start all of my we'll call them broadcasts, all of my broadcasts with the, am I live yet? Can somebody tell me if they can hear me? And this has been going on since October, and there's no end in sight to it at all.
What I like about that is that you said that you go out broadcasting with actually no idea of what you're going to say, and I like to think that we have helped pioneer that kind of spirit.
Absolutely,
because you'll have learnt it from somewhere. And of course, Richard. So this is the thing. A lot of people, on other, listen to podcasts and things, they've heard you, but very few people will have connected. Richard McDowell being CFTB. So this is a first that us having you on the podcast, and so this will be the first time that they've heard the voice of the legend that is CFTB.
So Jody, just how many times do you think you've said publicly on the podcast that you would never have me on?
Well, the thing is, what I like to do, I like to think that in some way your desperation to be on the podcast is what fueled your success at this 100-miler, because you think, I've got to do something impressive in order to get onto the podcast. And you've done it, and if you succeeded now, I think we will gladly allow people to come on if they pretty much set a new course record on a 100-miler. That's a pretty big thing to do. So you're gonna have to explain before we go on. You're gonna have to explain the CFTB moniker to the listeners who don't know yet, because I think this will be quite deep. So what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to talk a little bit about Lorna and Richard's kind of background in running, the prelude to the Thames Path 100, which without having any spoilers here, they both won, and Richard succeeded in going a little bit fast and setting a course record. But we're gonna kind of unpack that. But I think it's first, we want to get some background on both of you, and I think maybe starting with you, Richard, because I think the CFTB thing fits very nicely into your running history. So where did it all start?
So, to those who haven't been listening to the podcast religiously for about 4 years, um, so I was training for the Bournemouth Marathon, and in the lead up to that, I like to do a fun local trail marathon called the Bacchus Marathon. Now, Bacchus was the Greek god of wine, I think, and the Bacchus is in Dorking, starts in Denby's Vineyard, and it's on the same day as Marathon de Medoc, which is slightly more famous, has slightly higher quality food and alcohol. It's a fun race, and I was treating this as a hard supported training run, and I may not have drunk all that much wine. So I set off at fairly brisk pace and ran 2:30. I think I was about 35 minutes ahead of second place, and I think the third place, maybe second place. Apparently didn't think this was really
Keep it in the spirit of things.
exactly.
Literally the spirit.
And this gentleman, who will remain nameless for the moment, posted his displeasure in the manner of comments on my Strava, and the main one was, "You cunt-faced twat biscuit, Mother Teresa should be dug up in honor of your glory." And it went on. There were several different comments, and then
This is amazing. Just
then
utterly
someone
amazing.
commented, peers. Someone said, "Oh, well done. You were absolutely flying when you went past me." And then this commenter said, "Piers, did you drink any fucking wine?" And yeah, so it was interesting.
So you were treating it as a training run,
Yes.
when everyone else was drinking, right? Okay. I mean, that's an interesting choice for a training run.
Well, it was local. It's fun. I didn't deprive anyone of any prize money. There were no prizes. Then a little while later, there was the Craft Half, which is very local to me. The Wimbledon Common. Again, 2 laps. Beer. There were about 4 beer stations. 2-lap half marathon, and again, this was a supported local trail marathon, half marathon, and I treated that. I went off quite hard. I think I was the only person wearing spikes for a trail half, and yes, I was about 20 minutes ahead of second place. I did actually lap David Hallard and Briggsy on that. And again, this guy hunted me down and reckoned he was the moral winner because the first 2 runners hadn't drunk wine. Now, second place was actually Felix, a club mate of mine, who's also a bad boy runner, and he was adamant, no, he had drunk beer. So this was inappropriate. So if anyone was going to claim the victory for first, then Felix should have been the winner. So. I think I mentioned this to Hellard, and he was most amused. And then CFTB stuck.
That's incredible. The fact is, the first time you could have been forgiven. It's the fact you kind of decided to rub it in his face on the second one that it makes me think that it is somehow contrived.
Well, I had no idea who this guy was.
Oh, that's an ultimate burn.
He's so bothered that he's actually tracked you down on Strava to put comments about it as well.
Yeah, he's my stalker. Yeah.
But just in terms of when, let's think about your background as a runner. Like, when did you kind of start running? Because your journey as a runner is you didn't. When you ran your first marathon, it wasn't 2.5 hours or anything else like that. You've been on a bit of a journey. So
I ran cross country at school and university, and then I got distracted by bicycles, I'm afraid. So I spent a while cycling, and I would call myself a reformed triathlete. So I had a while of cycling, and then a friend wanted me to start training with him because he was doing his first triathlon. So I did a few triathlons. I went into triathlon assuming that I was going to be strongest on the bike, because it certainly wasn't with the swim, because I can barely swim. And I discovered that I was actually better at running than I am at cycling. Being a scrawny little runt, that probably makes sense. and especially when it's hot weather. I seem to perform quite well when it's hot. So then family, with triathlon, you may have discovered this, Jody, or you may not have done. I'm not sure how much training you've been doing for your upcoming Ironman, but it takes a lot of time. Whereas running is incredibly simple by comparison.
Is this how you sell it to your wife or your family? If I'm going like, at least I'm not doing triathlon, that you should be glad that I'm only doing running, as you spend however many hours it is each week, off gallivanting around and not drinking.
It's just getting to and from work. You can't swim to work.
So is that whether you do the majority of your training then, just running? Well,
before I was working from home, before the world went crazy, the vast majority of my training was running to and from work. So I got a very nice commute, mainly off road. So I run halfway there in the morning and run all the way home. That would be 30k for the day. Do that 5 days a week. That's nearly 100 miles just during the week in 5 days, with a nice easily spread apart, easy to recover from, and it's practical. So you've always got to get to and from work, hit two birds with one stone, run home, job done.
See, this is the really interesting thing about this, because I think there's a lot of people, they look at the like the kind of the results you get and the the times that you get, and they think, oh, you must be spending your whole time training for this. But I think the important thing, and the thing I want to explore with both of you, is how you fit that training into your day. And so you're basically saying that you've worked your entire sort of running schedule just simply around a commute.
Yes. That was before the world went crazy. So I would work 8 till 4. I could leave the office at 4, run 13 miles home, and be back to pick up my lad from nursery at 5:20. And it would take longer than that if I was driving with the traffic or getting the train. So.
And how kind of, when did you then decide, at what point did you start sort of training to reduce your marathon times? When did that kind of kick in? How long ago are we talking?
Well, it's been a bit of a journey. So I did my first marathon, I think 2012 in India, which was a 2:59. That was my first marathon.
In India?
India. I was living in India for a while. And then my first marathon in the UK was the podcast favourite, Edinburgh.
Oh goodness! And you still persisted with marathons after that.
Well, I am from Edinburgh, so that's the reason I ran Edinburgh. My dad's.
You must be very disappointed then, not seeing anything of the city. So.
Fortunately, I know it quite well in advance. But so I think that was 2:52.
Yeah.
And then I joined an athletics club. Did my first London in 2016, I think, and went off the Good for Age start, 2:42, I think, off my first London, and then I've just gradually built up the training from then. So my commute to work, I used to cycle, and then I've just gradually, it was 5 days cycling, that was maybe 4 days cycling, 1 day's running, maybe 3, then 2, and it's been gradually moving up to entirely running.
And just before we move to Lorna, to find out what would you say were the things that you did that helped really bring down your time? What was it? Was it increasing the mileage? What was it? Was it something else about your training? Because I think that's really what would be useful for the listeners to know, as to that journey that you've been on.
It was two main things. First, I've significantly increased my volume. So for my marathon personal best, I averaged just under 100 miles from my 18-week training block. So consistent high mileage has worked for me. But the other thing is polarized training. So the easy runs are very easy. The hard runs are full on, balls out, trying to kill yourself.
So how does that mean? How do you split that then? So say if you're running to and from work, then the majority of those will be really easy runs, and then a couple of days, part of those will be hard, or is that
pretty much? Yeah.
Okay.
So it would always be really steady in the morning, a really steady 10k in the morning, halfway to work, Getting to work always nice and easy, really easy. Like for me, easy is like 8-minute miling. That's nice and steady. And then probably 2 or 3 days a week, it would be hard. So it'd be intervals on the way home. So maybe 3 times 10 minutes or something like that. Working in some hard sessions on the way home. And this is all sort of undulating gravel as well with a small backpack. So a little bit of resistance training at the same time. So you're not necessarily hitting the same speeds that you would in perfect conditions on a track with a bunch of mates dragging you round, but you get the same sort of training stimulus. So yeah, polarized training and consistent high volume.
Okay. So Lorna, what about your kind of story? Your beginning in running. When did you start running, and at what point did you start taking it really seriously?
That's a bit of a difficult question because I have done various types of running for many, many years, just extremely unsuccessfully. So when I was
what does that mean? Unsuccessfully? What? Running backwards? Not finishing?
No,
or,
well, I might as well
what
have
does that mean?
done.
Define unsuccessful running.
Well, when I was younger, just like your daughter, I started off by doing pony club, triathlon and tetrathlon stuff, and I then increased the distances into modern pentathlon, and I just hated running. It was my worst event. It involved me going from first to last pretty much every time at modern pentathlon, which is the most disheartening thing you could ever go through.
Because
So
I've
that's why
heard that like the run is the thing that can totally make the difference, and you kind of back that up, that you can either win it with that, or you can totally lose it with that.
Absolutely. I was incredibly lucky in as much as I could always count on my shooting. And so, as you mentioned on the podcast before, the pony club stuff is shooting, swimming, riding the pony, jumping, and then running at the end. And I'd always have a really good shoot. I'd normally win the shoot. I would do really well at the swim. I would probably expect to win the swim in our area as well. I would always go clear on the jumping. That was never a problem. Always had great horses. And then it would just come down to the running, which I was just terrible at, and I hated it. And there's nothing worse than going in knowing that you've got, like, it was only 1,500 meters for the running, and that just felt like at least 1,000 meters too far for a start. And I just didn't know what we were doing. Like, it's supposed to be this bit of fun or whatever that actually got to be really quite serious.
So let's just think. So what level were you competing at?
Oh, well, in the pony club stuff, that's all just a local area things, and I got to the national competition when I was old enough to do that. For the pentathlon, I mean, it's very much like a David Hellard kind of competition, enter stuff that you're only going to win sort of thing, because there's going to be 3 people doing it in the whole country, that sort of thing. It really wasn't a highly competitive particularly, but of the people that were doing it.
What's the 5th sport in the pentathlon? I've forgotten.
Fencing.
Fencing, right.
Yeah, which also I was surprisingly reasonable at. Yeah, I was
surprisingly reasonable.
Yeah, I could hold my own at that. I wasn't going to like run away screaming at that one. It was always just the run. And unfortunately, with the modern pentathlon, towards the end of my time doing it, they actually changed it so that the running was the last event, and they would add up all of your points up until that point, and then set you off in a so the person with the most points would start, and then they work out the points into seconds running, and then so the second person, third person, and so on go, and so by the time you finish the run, whoever crosses the line first wins.
Oh,
which is great. You're the winner. And it's also great if like you've just taken the whole field and you've gone from last to first. It is fucking terrible if you start off first and you come last, which is what I'm really good at.
So after this scarring, up to what age were you doing this?
Well, I did it reasonably well up until I was 18, and then I went to university and got fat and lazy and just moved that over to shooting then, because it didn't involve any kind of...
Just shooting. Good. It's good to maintain a skill like that. And then so how do you go from being scarred by running at that and then getting back into it?
It was purely by chance. I did a couple of half marathons. One when I was at university, I was drunk and I took a friend's spot for the Bath half. Don't know why, because it was naturally going to be a terrible experience. It wasn't as bad as I thought. I then didn't do it again until after I had my daughter, so it must have been sort of 2009 time by then, probably like a good 7 or 8 years after university. I did the Bath half again. That wasn't too bad. And then my father-in-law, Nick, has entered the Paris Marathon a couple of times, having done the London Marathon a few times. And every time he enters Paris, he ends up injured in some way and not being able to do it. So myself having done
Paris, I can understand why.
I love it. I've done it 3 times and I'll do it again. I thoroughly enjoy it. But myself and my brother-in-law James said, "Oh, look, we'll enter the marathon with you. We can all train together. We'll all do it together." And it was like the 3rd time that Nick had entered it. And so myself and James went away and entered it and started training and stuff. And a couple of months later, it kind of, "Nick, how's training going for Paris?" "Oh no, I never entered." So great. So just myself and James ended up doing that one, and the person we did it for ended up not even entering the bloody thing. And of course it was all to do with, I'm just going to get fit and I'm going to lose weight. And
how long? So that was your first marathon?
Yes.
And how fast did you do that?
4 hours 52. It was terrible. I went out too fast. I was not remotely fit. I didn't know what I was doing. I was horribly overweight. I was wearing a men's size large t-shirt, and it fit. So I know that I was. This sounds
like my first marathon as well. I mean,
it was just a terrible experience, and for some unknown reason, I just naturally thought that I'd really enjoy it, and I also thought that I'd see the Eiffel Tower, bearing in mind we run right past the bloody thing. But I was just so miserable, and I just looked at my feet the whole time, so I missed it. And I'm
struggling to pick up where you got the love of running from at this point. So
yes, I still haven't got it at this point. No, not at all. There hasn't been a single bit of enjoyment up until quite a while after this, actually. But I finished it. I managed to lose my suitcase in the Charles de Gaulle airport afterwards, so I didn't even end up having a medal. Brilliant. At the end of it. And I had forgotten to stop my Garmin thing as well, so I didn't have anything to prove it on what was the old Strava. I think it was the NICAP or whatever. So it was just a complete failure. But I came back thinking I had let myself down. I knew I could do better than that, despite not knowing what I was doing. It's like I know I can. I was expecting more, and I was expecting to enjoy it. And I had just so happened to get in with into a little bit of a friendship group with some people on the Runners World Forum, back when people used to do internet forums and Facebook was only just, wasn't really a thing. And they invited me into their Facebook group afterwards. And they were all talking about the next marathon that they were doing. And I'm like, you guys are bloody mental. Why would you want to do another one of those? And they were talking about doing Loch Ness, which was well, Paris is in the April and Loch Ness is in the September. And there's just the more they were going on about it, I thought, oh, maybe I could do this. You know, I did.
So there's a pattern here. It gets swept along by other people.
Yeah, absolutely. It was that, and they broke down the barriers really, because they were talking about running as if they enjoyed it, which is not something that at that point I had any kind of experience of. But they were saying that I definitely could enjoy it if I just sort of entered this next marathon. It might just be around the next corner.
And was that the one where you discovered your love of running?
I certainly started to enjoy it a lot more. It helped that I got given a race entry to Loch Ness by my husband for my birthday. He says he did it out of love. I say he forgot my birthday and panicked. But either way, we both ended up doing that marathon together, along with my group of friends. And having a training partner, back then we could run together. That made a big difference, running with somebody else and having the group, as well as like just talking about running and normalizing it, I suppose. So we went on and did that, and because they were talking about that, they're actually, people in the group have got a lot of collective experience, and so I kind of started picking up tips about how to do stuff, and it just sort of slowly started sinking in as I started to try it out a little bit. But I mean, my first long run that I did for Paris, I did 22 miles, and it took me like 4.5 hours or something. Can you imagine? I just can't even fathom why I would have thought that was a good idea at the time. But
so eventually, you know, obviously you've come to love running, and you know, Richard, for you obviously running was an integral part of your training and everything like that. What I want to know is, when did it kind of occur to you that an ultra is the next thing that I want to do? Start with you, Richard. Like, when did you kind of hit that point where you think, because you know, in terms of marathons, you know, you've been like driving your marathon time down. What's your fastest marathon time?
Fastest marathon 2:23:08.
2:23:08. So you've been pushing and pushing and pushing that. So what makes you then go, right, the next thing I'm going to do is an ultra? Because surely training for an ultra takes away from that, takes away from continuing to improve on that, or does it not?
Well, some would say that the longer the event you're training for, the less speed you retain. I don't think that's necessarily. I think you lose a little bit of your top end. I don't think you lose a huge amount, depending on what training you're doing. I'm by no means experienced in terms of ultra training, but I don't seem to have got all that much slower over the short stuff. And if anything, I think because of the consistent high mileage, I might have got a bit quicker. So last year, when there were no races on, I was just looking at other options. It's like, well, what are people doing? And FKTs, fastest known times, became popular. So what's local? What's popular in London? So I did the Jubilee Greenway, which is 60 kilometres. Goes past the Olympic Village, and it's a nice loop. It has quite a bit of the canal. It goes on the Greenway out to London City Airport, through Woolwich Foot Tunnel, and then back along the south bank of the Thames, and starts and finishes in front of Buckingham Palace. That was 60 kilometres, so that's almost like 1.5 marathons.
And how did you find that? How did you kind of find that, going over sort of marathon distance for the first time? Because this is the one you filmed, wasn't it? Didn't you?
Yes, yeah. I took a GoPro with me and just document it, sort of chattering away. I did certainly notice going over marathon distance, as like, okay, yeah, this is into unknown territory. Yeah, and I did slow down towards the end. I had a goal of, I think, knocking an hour off the previous time. I failed miserably at that. I only knocked 59 minutes off.
Is that the one? Is that the one that Martelletti did like a few days later?
Yeah, so I held that record of 3 hours 45 for 8 days, I think.
Are you? Is the relationship between you and Martelletti the same as that relationship between John Kelly and Damien Hall? Like,
Uh,
have you ever tried to like knock each other's records out?
no, he is significantly faster than me. To be fair, if anything, if he wanted to beat me on any distance, I'm sure he could.
Oh, do you think so?
Oh
You
yeah,
think so?
yeah, he is
Okay.
properly quick. He's properly quick. I think his marathon PB is about 2:16.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's head and shoulders above me. Yeah, I'm not denying that in the slightest. The I think he took 6 minutes out of my time. Now I'd gone ridiculously early in the morning, and I had a bit of a detour, a couple of minor detours because of locked gates going to parks. Um, so I think my time was a couple of minutes shorter. So I think if if it had been equal, he probably would have taken about 4 minutes out of me. And I don't know how hard he was trying, but I thought to
And he
be
just done
to
his
be only
shopping or
four
something
minutes
like that. Wasn't
behind
he carrying
Martelletti, I
shopping
was quite
bags or something
pleased.
like that?
Sorry, what was that, Jody?
Wasn't he quite casual about it? Didn't he give the impression that he'd just been shopping or something, and
Not
then he hadn't
entirely.
tried it?
No, I think he had a reasonable go. I think he had a reasonable go.
It's all
Um,
mind games, isn't it? It's all mind games with the that's the way to play it.
but I think he's a sub 14-minute 5K runner.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
At,
Well,
at, at least low 14s, at any rate.
and so you did that, and you thought actually there is something in this that I can kind of step up, and then so what did you do next? Was Capital Ring the next sort of
Yes,
step for you?
because someone had said, "Oh, why don't you do the Capital Ring?" I said, "Oh, that's ridiculous. That's 78 miles or something." But I'll go for the Jubilee Greenway. Seems like it's not too far out of reach. And then, sure enough, a month later, I was doing the Capital Ring. Uh, so I'd gone out, I'd done a full recce on my mountain bike to record the whole route and make sure that I wasn't going to be getting lost and things. I did a bit of legwork to make sure that I could have a proper effort at it.
So this is
Uh,
actually this is something to highlight now that your preparation is kind of next level, isn't it? Like the level of preparation you do, you're a bit of a spreadsheet
oh, you've got to have a
spreadsheet
spreadsheet. Everything's got to have a spreadsheet. Yep, yep. So I'd done my research. I'd made sure that I'd meticulously mapped the route out. And actually, I'd done the same I hadn't done the whole route for the Jubilee Greenway, but things like for the Jubilee Greenway, I knew that I was quite possibly going to encounter some lock gates. So I had two routes. I had one route on my Garmin watch that I was following. I had a second route programmed into my cycling computer with all my contingency options.
Wow.
And that was just running in my pack in the background. It was connected to my phone via my little headphones. So it was talking to me. So when I encountered a locked gate, my cycle computer was telling me what the alternative route was.
I don't know.
So I didn't need to stop and think, okay, I'm lost. It was like, okay, turn left onto such and such, right onto such and such.
I don't know. That seemed a bit cheating. But I think that's all top
No, it's
marks.
called preparation. It's called preparation, Joe.
Oh, I don't know. That's incredible. And so when you kind of stepped up then to the Capital Ring, what were your thoughts then? Like, yeah, I think the 100 is the next step, and it's completely doable.
It seemed like the logical next step. Since I'd done the 60 kilometers, to double that didn't seem too ridiculous.
Okay.
So again, I'd done my research. Now the record had just been. There are a few people had broken the record in fairly rapid succession, and the most recent person to break it was a couple of weeks before me, and he'd done it unsupported. I was like, okay, right, well, I've got to do it unsupported as well. So that meant I had to look into all of the points where I could get water.
Yeah.
So things like getting hold of a British Waterways key to use the taps along the canal and the River Lee, searching out public taps. Like I had a couple of friends given me some info on the ground, like a public tap going through Harrow School and one through Abney Cemetery, and actually Martelletti brought a tap to my attention. He stopped for water during his Jubilee Greenway, and there was three blocks of flats just along from University of East London, and there's a little box on the wall of one of them, and inside there is a tap, and that tap was key, because there was a big gap between water points. So I can thank Martelletti for some of my preparation.
This level of preparation,
from stalking him.
This level of preparation makes my nose bleed. Like the whole idea of going to kind of that level, that's insane. So that takes us up to...
I checked all of these water points out while I did my recce on my mountain bike the week before.
That's insane. Okay, so that takes us to that point, and then I take it the next point after that is the South Downs Way 50.
Yes, there's a bit of a gap between. So I think that was July for the Capital Ring, and then it's like, well, what's the next step? And people say, well, what about 100 miles? It's like, well, that sounds ridiculous, but not quite so ridiculous. The step up from 78 to 100 isn't too far. And I'd gone reasonably well on the Capital Ring. I think knocked an hour and a quarter off the previous record. And I did slow down a little bit towards the end, but sort of extrapolating out, that was a sort of 40 an hour 100 miler. Obviously, I wouldn't necessarily continue at the same pace, but it seemed like it was more in reach than it had seemed before. So for Centurion events, they run very good events in the UK, and they want to make sure people are capable of something similar before entering. So I needed to run a 50 miler to qualify to enter for the 100 mile. So the first 50 miler was the South Downs Way 50. The only minor fly in the ointment being that only 4 weeks between the 50 miler and the 100 miler.
Perfect in many respects, isn't it?
And then with COVID, the 50 miler was deferred by a week. There was only 3 weeks to recover.
Are you suggesting that you wouldn't ideally leave only 3 weeks between a 50 miler and your A race then?
Well, yes and no. I think probably 3 weeks between a 50 mile training run and the 100 mile race, you could probably absorb the training stimulus and recover well. But you go too hard on the 50 miler, leave it all out there, you're going to jeopardize your A race.
And did you leave it all out there?
So obviously I had this in the back of my mind. This is my B race. This is my qualifier. So I set off at a nice conservative half marathon pace.
Honestly, following you on the tracker, it didn't feel like it was a training run to the start of that.
Well, I'd had a little taper, and I don't often have a little taper. And I find when a taper works well, you just get to the start line and your legs you just feel like you couldn't do anything. Your legs feel like springs. You're full of energy. You could just go. And I'm not very good at running slowly under those circumstances. So I started with a guy called Pete Windross, who came third, actually. And we were chatting, and he said, "Oh, you're going too quick." I was like, "Oh, really? Oh, okay, I'll see you in a bit." And I was feeling good. And the start of the 50 miler, you have quite a sort of maybe about a 5 mile climb to get onto the South Downs Way, and then it's rolling. But I think after I got on to the South Downs Way route, I think I did a 10k split of about 35 minutes.
Please tell me it was all down.
At one point, I had my watch auto lapping every kilometre and giving me splits, and when it came up with a 3:15 kilometre, so oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah, and exactly. And so, at what mile did you then think maybe I should change this down a little?
Well, I was feeling fantastic. It felt easy. It felt so easy, and I was thinking, oh, Tom Evans' course record. Well, that's a given. That's in the bag. That's just going to be one of these just goals to just tick along the way. Then I was thinking, actually, hang on, this isn't my A race. This is just my qualifier. If I go too hard today, I'm going to screw up my chances in my A race. Now,
Wait, it took you about 25 miles to realise that, did it?
pretty much, yeah. So I think my marathon split was 2:53-ish, something like that, in the 50 miler. Now, I'm not saying there's probably a good chance I would have blown up horribly if I'd carried on with that pace anyway. But I took a decision that if I want to go well in a couple of weeks' time, I really need to back it off. So I walked all of the hills in the second half, took it really steady, finished. Yeah, I was tired. I can't deny it was still a 50-mile race with nearly 2,000 meters of climbing. But yeah, I felt that I recovered quite quickly from that. And if I hadn't taken the second half really steady, that wouldn't have been the case. I'm not sure how close I could have got to Tom Evans' course record, but I definitely wouldn't have recovered as quickly as a result.
Okay, all right then. So let's leave that there, because then that takes us right up to the Thames Marathon 100. So for you, Lorna, at what point did you think, okay, 100 mile is a thing for me? Because you have some very specific experience pacing. You've paced me on the Thames Path 100, you've paced Ali, you've paced lots of different people. Was it always your intention then that 100 miler was kind of your thing? Or actually even go further back, when did ultras, or even pacing for ultras, sort of come on your radar after not liking running for so long?
Funnily enough, I think I did an ultra. I did the race to the Stones, and there's a few recurring themes in my journey that are very different to Richard's experience, obviously, because I'm coming from a place of hate and hatred towards running to start with.
Which I think 80% of runners do come from.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know what? As you get fitter and you get better at it, you do tend to start to enjoy it more. And I can't deny that I absolutely love running now. But whereas Richard came from just complete natural talent on top of obviously a crazy work ethic, and obviously being ultra prepared in every way, shape or form, I've rather bludgeoned my way through from having absolutely no talent whatsoever, and just doing an awful lot of training and having a lot of opportunities where my friends have popped up at just the right time to really motivate me or give me encouragement that has set me up for certain races or like for my next goal. And to start with, it was my friends talking about the 100 Marathon Club. My friend Emily and Natalie were doing the 100 Marathon Club. That got me into doing a lot of like double marathons and just doing an awful lot of marathons. Yeah. Then I decided that was a terrible idea, and I didn't like that idea at all.
And how many did you get through before you realised that was a terrible idea?
At least 20. Probably 20 marathons or so. But I did the race to the Stones, and I thought they do this clever thing where it's a 100k trail race, but you can either do it all in one go or you can split it into Saturday and Sunday 50k's. And I thought, well, that's a clever idea. I've done double marathons, and what I'll do is I'll do double 50k's. And turned up for the first day to my first proper trail ultra, and proceeded to try and run it at my marathon road pace, which didn't work, and I didn't turn up for the second day, funnily enough.
Did you not?
No, and I don't know whether to count that as a DNF or what.
Absolutely. Because that is a DNF.
Is it? In which case, that's my first.
I don't know. It's a DNF. I don't know. Is that DNF?
Is it? It's I don't know. I did part of it. Nothing would have made me turn up for that second day. just nothing at all. It was just it was a shit idea, quite frankly. And then but I did come away again thinking that I had really done a bad job of that. And I did enter it the year after, and I just thought, you know what, it wasn't my running that was the problem. My problem was that I entered it as 250 Ks. It would have been far better to have just felt that shit and carried on going for an extra 50K than feeling that shit and then going home and sleeping on it, because no one in their right mind is going to get out of bed feeling like that afterwards, whereas I would have happily just carried on otherwise.
Do you know what, that's a good point. And that we've talked about multi-days, and I do think it is easier running 100 miles than doing 250-milers or even 3 33-milers over 3 days, because it's just that getting home, going to sleep, or having a sleep and then getting up to do it again. I think there's a certain amount of willpower and everything that goes with it.
There is, and a lot of preparation and organisation. If you know what you're getting into with the multi-day ultras, then they can be really glorious. And I have gone on to do I've done 5 days in the Hebrides with Rat Race, and that was really fantastic. I had no place being there. I was terribly unfit. But I had the mentality for it because I knew what I was going into, and I knew exactly how terrible it was. It's when you go into these things thinking that they're going to be really good fun, and then they just hand your ass to you.
So and I want to know. So when did So this was with you. This is a very stealth thing. When did you all of a sudden go from I'm pacing other people, I'm doing that, to I'm now going to go for these things seriously? And what was kind of your training? Because I think this is another thing. How do you fit that around family life, work, and everything else?
Mm-hmm. Well, I first went and did volunteering for Centurion. I think it was in 2017, and so I must have already had my eye on that sort of thing back then, because I knew who they were and what they were about. But having witnessed people doing that to themselves, it took me from 2017 to 2021 to actually enter one and do one.
Was that conscious? I mean, it was pacing people, stuff like that. What did you have in the back of your mind? I'm doing this with a view to doing it, or was it just a case of I
wanted to be helpful. Don't get me wrong. I absolutely wanted to be helpful, and I love running, and I love running events, and I wanted to be involved in those things. And there's no better way than volunteering or crewing a friend or pacing. But I absolutely, as soon as I started being involved in those things, I could see how beneficial that was going to be to me. But equally, I would have done my first 100-miler in 2018 if I hadn't have been repeatedly injured. So although it looks like I've been biding my time for years, mostly I've just been horribly injured for years. I haven't quite got around to it. I think I've actually pulled out of more Centurion events than I've actually done.
Oh my goodness! I've had more refunds from Centurion events, I think, than anyone else. I thought
they are popping up their earnings on
yeah, exactly. I'm a bank for Centurion, essentially. So so just to sort of compare this with Richard, then, what kind of in the kind of the run up to Thames Pass 100, then what kind of volume were you doing? What was your kind of training week looking like?
Well, I had been really lucky to have actually been able to hold myself together for a reasonable period of time, because, as I had said, I was injured in 2018 and all of 2019. And then I managed, when we went into the lockdown, I was injured then as well. And it was a case that I can't believe that I can see all of these people. The only thing that they're doing is running now, because we've got literally nothing else in our lives, and everyone was out running, and I didn't even have that. And it just got to the point where I thought I have to pull myself out of it. Saw a photo of myself at my birthday, and I just looked terrible, and I was feeling really sorry for myself as well. And Dom said, that's Dom, my husband. He said, most of this shit is just in your head. You just need to like start from scratch and start again. And I did. I started pretty much from scratch. And I managed somehow or other.
What does that mean, starting from scratch exactly?
Well, as I said, I'd had a good couple of years of really, really broken training, constantly injured. As soon as I started to get my hopes up with like starting to get training back on track, sort of 40 miles a week or so, I'd get injured again. And you know, it's the hope that kills you, isn't it, with these things?
And so,
like,
so how did you avoid that this time?
To be quite honest, I don't know. I didn't completely avoid it. I still had a couple of periods of injury. However, I also had the best training of my life. I'm running faster now than I've ever run before because of the training that I've done, which is I finally managed to put consistent tempo and interval sessions in, which is because I've been prescribing them for the Bad Boy Running Club. And
is that the key to it? Running a running club and then having to do all the things you're prescribing?
I have genuinely tested out all of the sessions up until relatively recently. I've done them first or at the same time as prescribing them. And it works. I mean, those things are there for a reason. That all of the elite people, they're not pretending. It doesn't happen by accident. They work really hard and they do these sessions that are just the horrible sessions to do at the time. And I'd always shirked off of them in the past, just feeling like I didn't really need to do them because I wasn't fast enough in the first place. But of course, that's just complete, like, you're never going to be fast enough if you don't put in those kind of sessions. And as you get fitter, like, more of these sessions become available to you and you get a strange pleasure in absolutely beasting yourself. And I had been running at the best running of my life.
And so what kind of mileage were you up to then, say, just going before you were kind of tapering for the Thames Bath 100?
Well, I had done anything between 50 and 80 miles generally, I would say, depending on how the long runs fit in at the weekend. But for the actual concerted effort for the Thames Path, I had decided that because of my injuries, I wasn't going to do split runs. Like Richard, he does a lot of running in the morning and in the evening, and it's a great way of getting your mileage up. I don't think that I can do that. I think that I need to have, a decent rest before going the next day. So I would happily run every day, not have a rest day, and it doesn't necessarily bother me about having rest days. But again, I think from my injury point of view, I have to have a rest day. So we meticulously scheduled a rest day. We scheduled the weekly runs to be sort of 8 miles, and doing that I had Monday off, and then the other ones were 8 to 10 miles. And then on the weekend, we were always scheduling either double 20-mile runs, Saturday and Sunday, or a bigger one, like 30, 40 or 50 miles, and a smaller one on the next day. So to start with, it was a terrible idea, but I did get into it.
So I asked Richard, what were in terms of like his marathon training, what were the big things he did in terms of like improving his times, all that. What would you identify as the big things that really made a difference to your either your fitness or the gains that you made in terms of your speed and everything? What would you say the key things are?
I have always worked on consistency. Even back after my very first marathon, the first thing that I targeted when I knew I wanted to get better at it was going out 4 times a week without fail. Because for my first marathon, it had ended up being 2 or 3 times a week, and I'd maxed like 25 miles a week, which of course, when you're training for a marathon, which is 26.2, and you're not even covering that distance in the weekly training, it's never going to work well. unless you've got innate talent or whatever. So I've started by focusing on doing 5-mile runs 4 times a week. And then over the years, I had built up to running 6 times a week or even 7 times a week. There was a period of time when I was doing a lot of double runs and things, which were great. I mean, they do really get you fit really quickly and build a resilience, but I don't think that my injuries can cope with that anymore, unfortunately.
Okay.
But it's always the consistency. That is the number one thing. People can do high mileage, or they can choose to do less miles and run faster. Those can kind of even out in a way. You can run hundreds of miles if you want to, and it will get you out of an awful lot of trouble. It won't give you the top end speed though. And so it really depends on what it is you're trying to get out of your races. I've always raced my races, even in my worst times. That 4-hour 52 marathon, I was racing that. I mean, at the speed of a striking slug. I was running my heart out that day, and I always will do. I can't particularly get my head around going to a race and then running that okay because I've got another one the next week and the next week and the next week. Nobody cares that you're doing 300 milers in 4 weeks or whatever. That's might be your own personal goal, but for me, I only care about the one that I'm doing on the day. So even when I was doing the double marathons, I'd run out like I was trying to qualify for Boston, and then the next day I'd run out and try and qualify for Boston again.
So essentially, you're saying that Richard chickened out on the 50-miler. He should have run it.
No, I think that
that's the undertone that I'm getting there.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Okay. So I just want to take you then, right? So that takes us right up to the point of the Thames Path 100. I just really want to get a sort of a snapshot, really, of going into that. What were your kind of expectations? So, Richard, we know from your perspective, #formality was very much in the frame, and that must have felt a lot stronger after South Downs Way 50. So in the kind of few days before it, were you super confident? Were you just this is going to be clear? Knowing that people like Dan Lawson were lining up with that. What was your frame of mind?
Well, the 50-miler was a good confidence boost, but I'd just like to go back a couple of steps because I've been talking about my training pre-COVID. Training, I've been working from home since last March. I haven't had a run commute for over a year now.
Surely that's better. Is that not better, or does actually removing the working aspect actually make it more difficult because you have to have the discipline to do it?
Exactly. You've lost your structure. You've lost your excuse to go out twice a day running.
Oh, so what did you do then?
So all of my runs were, well, virtually unless I was double running, all of my runs were early morning. I mean, early. So I would get my runs finished by 7 o'clock.
So you wouldn't be splitting your runs anymore. You'd just do the whole lot in one go.
So I would sneak out at lunchtime. I would try and sneak out for a very gentle one at lunchtime, but I would be getting up 4:15 to be getting 20 miles in home by 7 o'clock to then do family breakfast and getting kids out the door to school.
What? We were in lockdown. What? Are you literally the only person that did that during lockdown? The whole idea was that you're supposed to be able to spend half the day doing your own stuff and not telling work about it. That was the point of working from home, wasn't it?
But it's also a question of balance with running and family. Once you lose that balance, then running is no longer just something you do. It's something which you then have to argue, and it becomes a rift, and it becomes a problem.
That is absolutely true. I think a lot of people would absolutely agree with that, and they'd actually see the difficulty. Actually, being at home and working from home it can be a lot harder because you are you're more visible, and you can't, you don't have the commute, and you don't have those.
You've
those
lost
other
your
aspects as well.
structure.
Yeah.
And I was saying before, every run has got two purposes. You're getting out the door, you're going to work. You're leaving work, you're coming home. You get your run and a commute at the same time. You remove that. Okay, if you don't get out of bed in the morning, you don't get to work and you get in trouble. You don't keep your job. Whereas if you decide that your alarm goes off at 4:15, you think, oh, sod that, and you stay in bed for another 3 hours, nothing changes, apart from the fact that you've lost your opportunity for a run.
So actually, do you think in the lead, the fact that you had that discipline and that you were competing against people that maybe didn't have that level of discipline, do you think that was an advantage? Do you think that actually there's probably a lot of runners who, because they've lost their structure over the COVID period, they're actually a lot worse as a result?
It probably depends on how good their previous setup was. I'm very lucky with how good my commute is, and having a shower in the office and having a supermarket right next door with a dry cleaner, so I can take my shirts in and have them. I never need to take my shirts on. I get them washed and pressed at work. I can shower at work and get all of my meals at work. So if you didn't have that, if you're always in the tube or driving, you might find that you did unleash this lots of free time. So it could be different. So it could be that people suddenly did genuinely have lots more time for running because they weren't commuting and they could go out and they weren't having to go out after work when they're already tired or whatever. But it was very much if you decide in the first 5 seconds, if there's any doubt in your mind in the first 5 seconds of whether you're going to go out for a run, you don't.
Okay, but this is what I want to know. Do you think as a result of that, you are a better runner, or do you not think you would have been do you think you would have been in a better position had COVID not happened?
I'm not sure. Because it did give me more freedom to mix up my run length and my routes as well. So I could choose, instead of always heading out the door, turning left and then getting onto the bridleway, it was all right. What direction am I going now? Am I going down to the river? Am I going down to Crystal Palace? Am I going wherever? Richmond Park. So I could choose where I was running and how far I was running and what routes. I did lots of exploring. But yes, I suppose if you weren't so disciplined, yes, I would have got a bit more training in. But it did mean that when I was double running, I did do, I think, 1 week where I was over 100 miles, but just single runs. And that's freaking hard work. Every run is over 17 miles or something. Splitting it into doubles is so much easier to digest. And my lunchtime run would almost be a sort of active recovery. So I'd had a hard, long morning run and really just a gentle 10k, just trot round Tooting Bet Common for 10k, just to really just shake the legs out. So there was a key difference in my training between when I was commuting.
Okay, and so then right up to the point of the sort of the Thames Path one, after you've done the South Downs Way 50, you were feeling pretty confident. You're confident that I mean, how were you confident? Because the thing is, we only found out of this after the race, but you had different goals.
Yes.
So how did you set those goals? And maybe you want to reveal what those goals were.
Well, I had crew. I had Dan Barrett, another Bad Boy Running member. I'd asked him if he was willing to crew me, and he was very generous with his time. So he offered to crew me, agreed to crew me, and he had quite a bit of experience. He's done lots of 100-milers, and we were having quite a lot of discussions, and I was quite open about. I didn't just want to go out and finish. I wanted to go out and win. I didn't just want to win. I wanted to set a new course record, and I wanted to make no bones, but I wanted to obliterate the course record. And I was totally open with Dan about this, and Dan was telling me what the UK records were for trail. I think the British record for trail is 12 hours 8 minutes. The second is, I think, 12:32. I was like, oh, well, let's go for 12:30 then. Let's try and be number 2 all-time British 100-miler on trail.
On your first 100-miler.
If I'd done my research a little bit more carefully, I would have noticed that these were set in the US on looped, flat, dry trails. Now,
I'm glad you didn't, because you weren't limited then by that knowledge. You had a more expansive approach to it. I think that was probably better.
So my spreadsheet had even splits, which again, looking back, is a little bit unrealistic, and it had cut me doing 12 hours 20. That was including 6 1-minute stops for crewing, just swapping over water bottles. And yeah, Thames Path, it's a river, it's flat, it's easy.
Flat, it's easy. Just keep the river on one side, and you don't have to worry too hard.
I was familiar with a bit from like the Woolwich all the way up to Walton-on-Thames, and it's a beautiful surface. It's all gravel, it's nice and smooth, it's tarmac.
Yes.
Unfortunately, it doesn't remain that way.
When you leave civilization, for some reason, it turns into more of a muddy track.
It does, and some very, very rough terrain as well. A couple of, to call them hills, there's one little hill with some steps and things. There isn't a huge amount of elevation, but yeah, it is pretty hard going on underfoot in places. And there was a bit of rain in the lead up, and yeah, it was quite wet on the day.
But you were still very comfortable and very confident at that stage that you had enough in it. Even with people like Dan Lawson, you think this, I'm definitely going to win this, and I'm likely to take a course record at the start. Yes.
I had an interesting conversation with James Elson at the finish of the South Downs Way 50, and I said, yeah, I'm looking for sub 13. I was quite open about that, which he then put on the little preview, which I wasn't necessarily expecting him to do so.
Was that mind games? Did you know exactly what you were doing? You thought, oh, Dan Lawson will be reading this.
I think I was just being a bit loose-tongued, but it could have worked that way. I think if you think of the Venn diagram of fast runners and runners who want to do 100-milers, there isn't a huge amount of overlap.
No.
Okay, there are people like Zach Bitter, who banging out just over 11 hours something for 100 miles on the track, and there's the recent guy, Alex Sorokin. In some ways, he's made us all look pathetic because we're all several hours slower than him. But
he was being chased by Mike Bisson. That's why.
Of course, he was running scared,
wasn't he? That's why he set that record.
So I think I am relatively unusual in the fact that I am a fast runner going long. And in the week before I did the South Downs Way, there was a local 5K organised by Athletics Club, and very high quality. And it's a course in Wimbledon with a decent hill. I ran 15:22, and it's generally regarded that this course is worth 25 seconds over a flat 5K. So I was in flat 15 shape for 5K.
Nice.
So the fact that I'd been doing lots of what I call grinding in my training hadn't really cost me too much pace.
What I like about that is grinding means something very different to lots of different people, and so we're going to leave that there. Okay, so I think we know that
We're
you
just
are
glad
confident.
that David.
Yeah, exactly.
We're glad that David's not here to make any comment.
Yeah, exactly. So that's right. So we'll leave that there. So I think we're going to say that you are pretty damn confident going into it, I think. So what about you, Lorna? So Lorna, you slightly different in the sense that this kind of crept up. There was this like murmurings of you, like Ali was going, fucking Lorna, she's really got into kind of like form, and she's really going for it. What were kind of your expectations going into that?
Right. The murmurings, Jody, were you, and you put it all over the internet.
I didn't. No, they didn't come. So Ali was bigging you up massively. And there's a certain, I don't know, there was a certain element to the fact that, you know, when someone is confident about something, they're quieter about it. They don't kind of, start giving it the big I am and everything. And there was a certain confidence when we were talking to you about how you were going to do. And so I think in your mind, you knew you were going to do well.
I had put my heart and soul into training. I can only thank Ali from the bottom of my heart, because she gave me the opportunity to pace her for her Grand Slam events last year. That was just the best experience for me, and gave me some decent miles in the legs last year, and let me see the courses as well. So the reason I actually chose Thames Path was because Ali put in just the most fantastic performance last year there. And I felt really encouraged and enthused and inspired by it. And it's the kind of course that I thought would be suitable for my kind of the training that I could give. Because although I live in a really hilly part of the country, I don't have great access to trails, and I do all of my training on the road pretty much. So I thought this is going to be a decent course for me.
What were you focusing on? Did you have this idea of a certain time, or were you didn't have an idea, but were you thinking about placement?
No, because I've got nothing to base it on at all. I've done a couple of ultras, but nothing since 2018. I had hardly done a race since 2018, and
was all there any indication in anything you've done? I mean, were you doing any 5Ks or anything else like that? Was there any indication of your kind of improvement in times or anything like that that gave you an indication? Actually, I'm competing now at a far higher level than I thought I was.
That's a really good question, actually, because obviously I've only ever got my training to go on and how I felt in training. I did the long runs in training at a pace that was really decent. I mean,
come on, I think you're being a bit modest here. Come on.
I say it with a smile on my face because, as I said, I was training out of my skin, and I put in a half marathon PB at Christmas time, and I did a marathon PB in part of my 30-mile run for training. So I know I'm running, really well, but that's for me. I don't know about anybody else. And so obviously when I'm supremely competitive, but only ever with myself. I really couldn't give a shit about how anybody else does, and I can't control that. And I've only ever run to be better than how I was before. And that's why I always train so hard, is so that I can be better and be faster or enjoy it more, on race day or whatever, because I just can't imagine going in underprepared, because I know I can.
I'd like to think you pacing me taught you about the dangers of going in underprepared.
You would think that it would do such a thing, but I can guarantee you that you were going no slower than I was on that course come the end. So it was like, who's more the mug? You know, I put in months and months, and look at how it all ended up. So
Okay,
we were
but okay, so there's an important difference between both of you, and I'd like to know just how this is kind of react. So, Richard, you very much went into this saying, yeah, I'm going to do this. I've kind of proved it that I'm going to be there or thereabouts as a result of this. Did you kind of feel any pressure around that, or does that kind of thing actually work in your favour? Do you feel like I like that, and that kind of will spur me on? What's your mindset around that?
I do try and have
You're a bit like a sort of a
factors
UFC boxer, Conor McGregor thing. Like, I say I'm going to do something. I say I'm going to knock him out in the third round, and that's what I'm going to do. Is that is an element of that to the kind of the way you did that, isn't there?
A little bit, I suppose. I try and keep myself accountable. So
Yeah.
when I did the Capital Ring, I sent out a little tracking link to all the people on my athletics club WhatsApp group saying you can track me if you fancy. In fact, my phone battery went dead, and they thought I'd died in Bromley. That's irrelevant.
As most people would assume in Bromley.
And again, I put out a couple of links before the South Downs Way saying, if you want to track me going out for a little jog in the.
And does that spur you on? I mean, if you went out and did it without doing that, do you think you'd run as hard, or do you think you'd run as effectively, or is that a really important part of your performance?
I think I've never dropped out of a race. I'm quite proud of that, and I think knowing that there are a bunch of people tracking me and watching my progress would, if I was thinking about dropping out, I would then be embarrassed to actually then explain to all the people who are watching, we were watching, but then you stopped. What I was like, I was a bit tired.
But there's a big difference between dropping out and really performing. Like, isn't there? Not dropping out of a race is one thing, because and you can kind of like muddle onto the end, but actually beating records is something completely different, because that's another level of performance.
It's interesting how James Elson actually sort of framed this as a bit of a head-to-head of Dan Lawson. He's got all this credibility. I watched his video of the Land's End to John O'Groats. That was just incredible. He is an incredible athlete. He has an incredible endurance, and James is saying, his strength is going to be in the second half, but he's nowhere near as quick as you. So it was very much like, here's the pretender, and he lasts the distance, versus here is this known quantity. He can do the business. He's definitely going to be there or thereabouts, but what will Richard do? He said we could see some fireworks, I think were his exact words. And I think my fireworks almost sort of went out at half distance though.
Okay, well, let's talk that. We'll come back to that. Lorna, did you feel any pressure at all? Because when you were mentioning the Centurion thing as well, there was that people were just like, oh. Did you feel, and then of course we were all hamming it up a bit, part joking, part.
Jody, you were hammering it up. No, nobody else was hamming anything up. You were hamming it up.
I didn't put it in the preview, did I? I didn't put it in the preview. No. So,
but to be fair, James only put it in the preview as a bit of a page filler. I was right on the very bottom, and having had the had all of the description of all of the ladies. Now, I'm not gonna pretend that I hadn't already done a little bit of looking on like Run Britain to try and look at who I was up against, because as I've said before, it's always the hope that kills you, not anything else. And I knew that I was running really well, but ultimately I know the level of people that go to these races, and I had looked down the list of people entered, and no one was Like there was no really obvious like big names of like, well, she's going to win it by 3 hours or whatever. So I did have a look at a few people, and it took like a minute and a half to realise that there was women there that had run the sub-3 marathons. So I'm like, do you know what? I'm just not going to waste my time looking down this list anymore.
So actually, there's a little bit of an advantage there in the fact that you were kind of probably a little bit unknown to those others.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the pressure? Did you feel the pressure in any way?
No, I didn't feel any pressure. I thought it was funny, and it was until I, intended with good nature. And I didn't, like, I've always gone into, well, for a start, I have won a couple of races, but it's not like I could never win anything around here. Like, I'm not just rocking up to a park run and being fastest woman at park run or any event whatsoever around here. Like, I'm not a spectacular runner in any shape or form, but on my day, and I think the longer the race, possibly, I have more chance of winning. But
you weren't particularly vocal about your kind of expectations. Is that?
I didn't have any. I really wanted to finish, and I really wanted to do the best that I could do. And I hadn't done anything near that distance before. And I only had my training to go on. And because of the way that we're doing the races at the moment, the time trial thing, you set off at, whenever you want. I knew that I knew that I wasn't going to be able to see the other people running for a start. So you have to do your own thing. And like Richard has gone in so prepared to all of his races and so well trained, there are parallels there. I'm not doing it to anywhere near the same level or the same outcome as Richard, but I still have a lot of those that mentality to set me up to be as good as I can be. Like, I didn't leave anything to chance. I trained very specifically for this race. I very much focused on my nutrition. It wasn't just luck that I didn't throw up or run out of energy. I very specifically trained on my long runs with my nutrition. I took advice from Gary House, who has been really kind to give the running club his time. I hit him up for information on how much carbs I should be having, and I really targeted that. I did the long runs in like the kit that I wanted, and that actually didn't pan out as well as I would have hoped. But there was lots of things that I did for this race that targeted the low hanging fruit, as it were, the things that I didn't have to do much to get a good benefit from. So I certainly tried to take away all of the things that might cause a problem on the day.
Okay.
And I organised myself, in that respect. So come the day, I knew that I just had to execute my plan, and just keep running until the end. Okay. The problem was my plan was fucking terrible.
Okay, okay. So let's talk about that race day itself, okay? Because I'm going to tell you what an outsider saw, and this is for both of you, okay? And so it'd be good to hear your kind of overlap with this and everything. So watching it, and of course, people setting off. They were setting off in sort of phases, weren't they? There was, kind of like staged and everything, and so it's a little bit confused to start. But what it seemed to the observer is that you both went out very fast.
Hmm?
Is that what happened? Was that the intention?
Richard can start with this. Tell us about his race plan, and then I'll tell you about mine.
Well, I wanted to start early because I wanted to finish in the light. I knew that avoiding a head torch was going to be key to keeping speed towards the end.
Yep.
And I thought that if I was going to be running the pace I expected, I wouldn't need any head torch, assuming I started early. And I had my pace goal, and I started out a bit quicker than that. But I also knew that the surface is good at the start, and I wanted to capitalize on the good surface. I thought that the difference in effort and power required to run faster on a good surface is very different to run reasonable pace on a poor surface. So had I thought a little bit more carefully, I would have put positive split on my timing. So yes, I was aiming to go out hard, yes. And I must admit, the mental calculations, it's like the first marathon split in 2:57. It's like, oh, this is a formality. This is a done deal. This is. I also had the ideas of I get the finish, I'd feel amazing, and I'd jog back down the course and see the second person. I'd jog them in. And
so you were thinking after 25 miles, you're already picturing how easy it's going to be at the end.
Oh yeah.
And you greeted
people
in.
Yeah. How naive
amazing.
I was. How naive I was. Yeah. Yes. I hadn't found any mud at this point. Hadn't found any nasty undulating fields and things. Yeah, and I had optimized as much as I could. So I was wearing custom shoes.
So there was a whole thing, wasn't there, about your kit and everything else. That the amount of custom items that you had was incredible. That you've created a whole, pretty much everything around this specific race, around your specific needs.
Yes, so I had for the South Downs Way 50, I was wearing original Vaporfly 4% shoes with a trail sole glued on. There's a Vibram Zagama, I think. So I'd sent these. I'd seen a place online, Cheshire Shoes, and a bunch of the podcast guys have done it now. Some of them have done quite a few of their shoes. So this was a fast road shoe with grip for the trails. Quite funny. I posted this on the ultra running community, and to say the response was polarized would be an understatement. A lot of them were saying I was going to break both my legs the first time I went out and things. But so I had another pair that had like Next Percent done with the same soles as well. My idea being that this is a fast, bouncy road shoe, which I know it's not just the speed, it's the magic foam also keeps your legs nice and fresh, certainly through a marathon distance. So I thought, well, if they keep your legs fresh through a marathon distance, they must be good over a longer distance as well. And I was actually quite keen for it to be slippery underfoot, because that would mean that anyone with road shoes, I didn't expect anyone else to have the same custom shoes as me.
Yeah.
The guy who came third, Pete Windross, in the South Downs Way 50, he was wearing Alpha Flies. So they're the top Nike road shoe. And he was fine in a pair of road super shoes in South Downs Way 50. But
that's the South Downs Way, isn't it? South Downs Way terrain is very kind of specific.
Exactly. So I knew that if it was wet underfoot, you wouldn't be able to be getting away with a fast road shoe. You needed to be wearing trail shoes. How many people are wearing a fast road shoe with a trail sole? Not very many. I knew that if it was...
How many people had lined up in a road shoe for the Thames Path 100, though?
I've no idea.
People. Surely, because the first half is pretty much all tarmac, so I'm pretty certain that the majority of people will do, or nearly all of it, if not definitely to Henley on a road shoe, and then you would change. But I mean, you're looking surprised, Jody, but you're the only mug that will buy a pair of trainers, never even take them out of the box, and then get his poor mother to give them to him at halfway or something. Like, I'll just start the whole bloody thing and then say, Mum, can you give me the hockers? And she hadn't got a clue what you're talking about at halfway.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that. Yeah, to me, it would never occur to me to run it in a road shoe, but actually, now you said that would make sense. But okay.
So I knew that if it was going to be slippery underfoot, I probably would be slower, but it probably would give me a larger differential to the next runner. I'd worn a couple of different packs for my FKTs. I worn a very, very small decathlon one for my Jubilee Greenway, which was fantastic, and a larger Innovate one for my Capital Ring. And I wanted something in between the two, and I couldn't find anything around, so I made my own. So I made a pack which was the perfect size. So it was the Decathlon. Decathlon only took 250ml bottles on the chest, so I had 500ml bottles on the chest. I know that getting soft flasks in and out of these little pockets can be a bit of a pain, so I got side entry zips on them. My pack was only big enough for what I needed, and I'd optimized everything. So I had the lightest head torches. I already had the lightest jacket because it's a fantastic jacket. And it was interesting, when I was kit checked at the finish of South Downs Way 50, it was noted that my pack was very small. You couldn't tell I was wearing a pack underneath my jacket.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And the guys were very intrigued to see that I had a 37-gram mobile phone, smaller than a credit card, things like that. So I had gone to quite a few lengths. The pack alone, empty, is 100 grams. I think that's quite rare for a 100-mile pack to weigh 100 grams.
Yeah.
So I had optimized as much as possible.
Okay, and so Lorna, say the start of the race for you. Then you seem to go out very, very quickly as well. Was that your intention?
This is where I say that my race plan was a terrible idea because it looks like I've just gone off way too fast, and that is exactly what happened.
You were third overall for a long period.
I don't know what happened. I mean, I was running well within myself at the time, and I would love to say in a way that actually I just got over enthusiastic and ran out too fast and then blew up. But unfortunately, that was me executing my plan to within reasonable precision of what I had wanted to do. And it just turns out that on that day, couldn't run as fast as what I thought I could, which is really embarrassing, and also really not like.
At what point did you realise that?
Right, so I've only ever based any of my goals, racing goals, on training. So if I was looking for a marathon PB or a marathon time going into a race, it would be directly proportional to how my training has been going. I've never just been a pie in the sky, suck it and see kind of runner. I've always been cautious, and I've always had what I believe are realistic expectations based on what I can do in training. And my going out on the race day, I was running sort of 7:50-minute miles, which now I just think you're such a mug, because that's just ridiculous to think that you can do that and there'd be no reason.
That was your plan?
That was my plan, and I just feel really embarrassed now to say that was my plan, but I could do that in my training. That is what I've been doing. I went out on all of my long runs like that and had no repercussions.
But isn't this true for both of you? I mean, like, the fact that you set that incredible pace at the start, surely that had a big impact on the other women in the race. In the fact that you were so far ahead, like, surely there is because a couple of them dropped out, for whatever reason. But the fact that you went out at that kind of pace, that must have had an effect on them.
Well, I think that I like to think that that's true, Jody, and Dominic has been trying to put a positive spin on it for me, because he says that I think maybe you broke some souls that day, and like that's why people dropped out a bit. Unfortunately, it also broke my soul, and so ultimately probably wasn't the best plan, because it was truly excruciating, and it was just the most humbling experience, this race for me, and I'm so embarrassed of some of the things that I did in that race. I truly got away with some absolute howlers,
Well,
and
the thing is,
it's just so lucky.
the thing is, this is an amazing thing to hear, because the assumption is, and I think this is always the thing, is like, even to finish a 100-miler, for most people, lots of things have to go right. Like, lots of different things have to go. People have stomach issues, people have all these different things. But the fact that you've won a 100-miler and lots of things went wrong is really interesting. And so I'd be really interested, because let's focus on both of you in terms of the things that you think really went right. And I think there's one thing that kind of sticks in my mind, is the fact that you both seem to get the aid station thing right. You were in and out of those aid stations. Richard, was your 1 minute 6 aid stations, did you pretty much stick to that?
Well, I wasn't planning on using the aid stations at all. I was just planning on, I'd taken down all of my pre-mixed Morton. I'd given him a little crib sheet of where I was going to see him, because I was also aware that if I wanted to see him frequently, he might have a challenge getting between the different points quicker than me. And if
It's
he
a
missed,
hard one. It's really, I mean, it's hard supporting on the Thames Path 100, because it's difficult getting from.
so if he missed me at
point to point.
one,
Yeah.
and I was expecting him every 8 miles or something, and I wasn't going to see him till the next one. If he'd missed me once, there's a chance that would be a knock-on effect at the following ones as well. Thought, well, let's make sure. I was only planning to see him 6 times. And I told him, okay, I want this much Morton drinks. That was all pre-mixed. I'd even 3D printed a funnel for him to make filling my bottles easier.
And then for you,
It's screwed into them to make filling easier. Number of gels I wanted him to give me, salt capsules, and I know that I wanted him to know my plan better than I did. Right. So that when my brain stopped working, he would be on the ball and know what I had at least wanted before the start, even if I wanted something completely different then.
Okay, and then what about you, Lorna, in terms of your, the sort of times at aid stations and everything else? Because you didn't have a pacer until, I think Dom had you for the last 23 miles or so. Yeah. And so how are you kind of like in and out? Because you've seen this, pacing people, getting someone, the tendency is they go in there, want to sit down, have a chat, eat some tomatoes, that kind of stuff. I suppose you've seen on the other side. Did you kind of stick to that?
This was probably the most important thing that I picked up from all of the crewing and the pacing, was the amount of time that you can spend dicking about at aid stations through no real fault of your own. It's just incredibly easy to lose time without realising it. And that was a really big part of the kind of low-hanging fruit that I was targeting, was a definite attempt at no dicking about at checkpoints. And I didn't stop at any of the checkpoints that there were crew points, shortly afterwards. So I didn't go into a lot of them in the first half. Unfortunately, Dom didn't manage to get to one of them because the motorway was closed. So I ended up missing, I think it was Maidenhead. And I could hear the panic in his voice, because we'd organised that I always phone before coming into a sort of checkpoint to tell him what I sort of thought that I needed, whatever that might be. And he's like, well, I don't think I'm going to get to you. And I was like, it doesn't matter. It's not a problem. It didn't matter to me at all. I could have stopped at checkpoints if I needed them. But as it happened, I just carried on going through until the next one. Next time I saw him, I didn't stop at the crew points at all. But I absolutely did make sure that there was no hanging around at checkpoints. That was one of the things. And actually, if you look back at my time, I won by about 20 minutes. There will be people on there, and probably the woman that came second. I bet there's 20 minutes of dicking about at aid stations.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? Incredible.
Yeah.
So what about nutrition then? How did your nutrition plans go? Did you eat as you expected? You know, were your level of Morton right, Richard?
Well, I know from marathon running that my stomach is my weak spot.
Yeah.
And the fact that I train almost exclusively fasted is probably not ideal, looking back. So my morning routine is out of bed, bathroom stop, clothes on, out the door. Nothing to eat, nothing to drink. If I'm doing over 25 miles and it's going to be hard, I'll take a couple of gels with me. Yeah. Otherwise, it's nothing. No water, no food, nothing at all. And it's funny. I can happily run 20 hard miles in the morning, going up at 4:15, and not be hungry till about 8 o'clock. Whereas if I just get up at a normal time, I'll be hungry within sort of 45 minutes. So my stomach, my GI system does very much shut down when I'm running. So the blood all goes to your lungs and your legs. The important part is it doesn't go to your brain. Blood is diverted away from one of the most important organs, just to get you going. And I'd had an interesting conversation with Robbie Britton actually before I'd done my FKTs, and he was saying, from a physiological point of view, you might be able to sustain the pace which you're planning, but if you need to get fuel on board, you might need to slow down purely to keep your GI system online. So you need to be going slow enough to have your stomach still working.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very key point. And he was saying, well, when he did the Thames Path, I think he stopped for 5-minute walk breaks every hour. And that gave him a chance to just get the heart rate down, get some food in, get back on track, and then pick it up again. And I didn't really take that on board, I must admit. So I was sort of working on the principle that the pace I was going to be going at, which was sort of 7-minute miling, was going to be slow enough that my stomach could keep on going as I was running, and I didn't need to be taking breaks for digestion. I'd also, on my obligatory spreadsheet, I'd worked out how many calories I thought I was going to need, about, I think, 35 calories per kilometre. It was going to be about 5,500 calories in total. And I was juggling the amount of drinks and gels and looking at the total volumes and total calories, what I thought I could probably consume. I think in the South Downs Way 50, I drank 1.5 litres and a couple of gels, and I was probably close to being properly empty and bonking towards the end of that. I wouldn't have been able to sustain that fueling regime much longer and keep on going at that pace. So I knew that I needed more than I'd done then. So I was working on a calorie deficit about 1,800, maybe 2,000 over the day. Then I was listening to an interesting, I think it was the Ultra Run Festival. It was all online. I was listening to a presentation, James Elson and Robbie Britton talking about all things ultra, going longer, I think was the name of the talk. And they were talking about carbs per hour. And they were saying top end is 80 grams of carbs per hour. So I then looked back at my spreadsheets to see what the total number of calories I was aiming to consume converted into carbs and for how long I was going to be running for, and it was 77 carbs per hour. Of course, the quicker you're going to run, the smaller the time period you have available to consume. Now, given that I'm only 60 kilos and I don't train with any food, possibly aiming to get to the very top end of this bracket during a big race was optimistic.
So what happened?
So it was all going wonderfully well. First marathon clicked off 2:57, and this was including very, very brief stops. Dan was very much on the ball. He was exactly where I'd wanted him to be, ready with exactly what I'd asked him to have. No dicking about. These were smooth. These went like clockwork. Coming into Henley, which is pretty much the halfway point, it's like, how are you doing? It's like, oh, so it's starting to feel hard. I think that's captured on. I think someone got that on video. They stopped the video just moments before I puked horribly. I was
Did you feel it coming? Did you know it was going to happen?
No. I was like, I think what I've had in marathons in the past, I always used to overfuel in marathons. I would always get sort of 6 or 8 gels in. I would get to the finish line and then they would all come out again. It's like, well.
Oh, you've got form.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
But that's running fast. So I thought I'd be running significantly slower. That's fine. I'll be able to absorb all of these. So running fast, getting lots of water, and not lots, but some water and gels in. I just felt they were just jiggling around inside me, doing absolutely no good, probably just slowing me down. And then as soon as the adrenaline goes, you stop, then they all come out again. And I think that happened to a certain extent again at Henley. I'd overfueled massively.
Yeah.
For what I was following my plan.
But were you feeling bad or anything, or did you not feel anything? I was starting
to feel tired.
Right.
I was starting to feel that yes, this was not necessarily going to be quite as much of a formality to hit my 12 hours 20. I'd slowed down slightly, but I was still very much on track in terms of the overall schedule. And then I puked up massively. I puked a huge amount, and it was like I'm walking on. No, it's a bit more. Yeah, a bit more. Salt capsules, in they go. Oh yeah, one of them's on the ground. And I was, I think the mind had started to go a bit as well. And so, oh, you're right. He's like, I'll be right. Grab me nutrition, then just sort of trudged on, and yeah. And there was a corresponding significant low spot after that. There was a massive bonk. And I did very much think this was race ending.
Oh, did
certainly,
you?
Certainly aspirations ending.
Yeah.
I knew that goals, the A, the B, and possibly the C goal, may well be out of the window, and it was going to be a long, hard way to the finish.
Okay. So at the halfway point for you, Lorna, how were you kind of feeling at that point? Was your nutrition going well?
Yes, nutrition was absolutely spot on. I'm really happy with my nutrition, and I'm proud of myself for that because I worked for it. It didn't happen by accident. When Richard was making his custom-made backpack, I was focusing on custom-made flapjacks, which is not a surprise because I like food more than I like backpacks, funnily enough. But I was horrified when we first set about trying to organise the nutrition because Dom said, right, well, you're just going to need to do gels and Morton. And I'm like, hell no, this is an ultra. We do sandwiches and, cakes and flapjacks and bits and bobs from the aid stations. And slowly he brought me round to his way of thinking, in as much as you definitely need to be targeting the right amount of carbs. And I'm surprised that Richard left it so late to realise that he needed 80 grams of carbs per hour, because maybe he doesn't focus so much on the nutrition for his marathons, as he said. And I agree, it wouldn't have crossed my mind either, but reasonably early on, I had realised that we're going to need to be targeting sort of 80 grams of carbs an hour. And so for my long runs, the 20s, 30s, 40s and 50-mile runs, we organised me so that I was doing, I started at 60 grams. I did one run at 60 grams and I felt like it was rocket fuel. I'd never felt so well fueled for a 20-mile run in all my life. And then the next, after that, I was like, well, that worked really well. I didn't feel unwell or anything. We'll just hit it up to 80 grams. So all of my longer runs after that, I was targeting 40 grams an hour. 40 grams every half an hour, which is like an absolute ton of food. So I said to Dom, I can't eat all of that, or for this whole race. So that's where the more 10 came in, and the gels as well, because you can drink one flask of Morton and that's 80 grams. So that's 500 mLs in an hour, which is absolute luxury compared to 2 flapjacks an hour. It sounds like it should be heaven.
It
but
sounds
it was
lovely,
just
yeah.
hell. Oh,
but it's really,
God,
the thing that's really interesting is the two perspectives that you came from, and the impact that had on sort of your nutritional choices. Because I think that's really interesting.
Despite the fact that we are not, we're not on the same page at all when it comes to running abilities, we have come to the race with surprisingly similar ideas in a lot of ways. Like Richard was saying about his custom shoes, I don't have Vaporflies because I don't run fast enough to warrant such ridiculous shoes. But I do do a lot of my training in the Nike Invincibles, which is the same sort of, it's the same kind of foam stuff, which is really good on your legs and ideal for long, slow runs, and they're a road shoe. So I had exactly the same idea as Richard, which was to send them off to exactly the same place as Richard, not knowing that that's where he had sent them. And I got a trail sole put onto my Nike Invincibles. And then I bought another pair of Nike Invincibles and left them as they were. And my idea was going to be that I do the first 50 miles in the road sole shoe, road soles, first 50 miles, and then either change into my Nike Pegasus trail shoes, which they're made like that. They're a road shoe but with a trail grip, and they are truly fantastic, but the grip on them is crap. I mean, it is a summer trail shoe. The minute it sees anything remotely wet, you'll be on your arse. And unfortunately, it had hoofed it down for a good, decent portion of the day before, and then proceeded to piss it down all morning. So I thought, right, the trail shoes are out. I'm going to have to maybe swap at 50 miles to the custom-made shoes with the grip that I had on, because it was just a little bit more aggressive than the summer shoes. So I got to the 50-mile mark, which was already 20 miles more than I wanted, because, as we said, my pacing was absolutely atrocious, and by 30 miles I was basically done. I knew I'd cocked it right up, and there was no coming back from it. So it was then a case of, right, well, you're just going to have to do what you can do now. And I changed my shoes at the 50-mile mark and put on the Invincibles with the slightly more grip. And within 8 miles, I changed them again because they were just so heavy. Oh, really? The mud on that trail, it's not mud, it's clay. And it's like a flipping 5-stone child is on your foot, like flipping, and you're dragging them through the mud. I just couldn't bear it. And I think it's funny what you think of when you're on your own and you're tired. But unfortunately, the idea of them being too heavy had already been put in my mind by Inception, by Lawrence Baldwin, who I'd gone for a run with, a club run, a week or two before, and he'd done the same thing. He'd put these soles on his shoes, and he just made a flyaway comment, oh, they feel heavier now with this grip on compared to...
Well, they're 50 grams per shoe.
Is that a lot?
Well, on an X percent, that's 20%.
Right. See, I don't know. I don't know at all. And I didn't know what I was doing. But unfortunately, Lawrence just mentioned that they were heavier. And so I had already got it in my mind that they might be heavier. And then the minute the mud touched these shoes, it was like, oh my God, they're 12 stone. And I just couldn't bear it. And so, but at the next checkpoint, 8 miles later, I had changed into, the Nike Pegasus trail shoes that I thought I was going to be on my arse on. And I was just like, do you know what? I'll take the risk because I can't bear dragging myself through this mud. And so I just took the risk. And actually, they were fantastic. They were really, really nice. But we have gone to the same sort of ideas with the shoes. I just really wanted to save my legs. I wanted to have the foam and make it to the halfway point in as good condition as I could. I don't know whether that that was thoroughly negated by my terrible pacing at that point. So I don't know whether it was really worth it or not. I really couldn't tell you.
Okay, so let's think about, say, the last, say, 25 miles of the race, the end point. Like, what were, like, both you kind of, like, what kind of state were you in with the last 25 to go? Were you doubting anything? What were kind of the thoughts going through your head, and do you think you'd be able to hang on? I mean, how far ahead were you at that point, Richard? Did you have an idea of your how often were you checking that to see kind of where you were?
Dan was giving me updates. The issue was that I think the guy who came in second started at, I think, about 7:30. So it was hard to tell exactly what the gap was because we hadn't started at the same time.
Yeah.
But he was saying, well, it's fine, it's comfortable, you got a big gap, don't worry. So I wasn't particularly concerned, but I knew I was moving significantly slower.
But this was you were in new territory here, over 75 miles.
Oh yes, and my nutrition plan had gone completely out the window.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so on the Capital Ring, I had alternated between Moreton and Noon, and I then did the same for the second half. My Moreton was a bit slightly more dilute, so easier to digest. So it was one Moreton, one Noon, and I probably wasn't as diligent about getting it down as I was. The gels, I think I was still going on the gels because I was like, Dan, how are the gels? He's like, no, you've had all of them. Oh, okay. Well, I half of them were non-caffeinated. The first half was non-caffeinated. The second half was caffeinated, and I knew I was a bit down on my gel intake. So I was like, have we got any normal gels? I was like, no, you've only got caffeinated gels left. I was like, okay, right, okay, only caffeinated gels. I did have a couple of caffeine bullets as well, and he did say, well, you might want something savoury, you might want some crisps or something, and I'd given him a big multi-pack of crisps, so I had to grab a packet of crisps from him at some point. And but yeah, it's a bit of a haze, to be fair. I probably wasn't thinking particularly well. It was a bit of a roller coaster, to be fair. I think there were some low points, but there were also some very high points. If you look at the photos that Dan took at me, Dan took a photo of me every time he saw me, and I was looking deliriously happy. And
you looked deliriously happy in all of them. I know, like, it was just like you're putting that on. It looks incredible.
Henley, I don't think I quite was, but I was doing okay. I was probably very happy to see Dan. It's like, because after the first 5 minutes, I was on my own. Yeah. So I started like 2 minutes past 7, and then pissed past a dozen people, and that was it. I bumped into a friend near Hampton Court, and he ran with me for a couple of miles, and then I just saw a guy from Centurion doing, I'm not sure if it was a mobile time check, getting in a car, or whether he was putting up the rest of the marker tape. I saw James Elson at one point, but yeah, I didn't see many people, to be fair.
And then, so towards the end, were you down to walking? Kind of like what kind of pace are we kind of talking about in those sort of the last sort of 25, 10 miles? Just to kind of give an indication of how you were.
So I think my entire pace was 8-minute miling overall. So I was more
Which
7-minute
is
miling
insane.
on the first
That
half.
is just unbelievable.
So if I averaged 7-minute miling for the first half, I must have averaged 9-minute miling for the second half. But there were some walking stops and there were a couple of longer stops. I did stop at a couple of aid stations. I think it was any excuse to stop, and because my nutrition wasn't going down, it was like, oh well, I'll hop in here, and oh, they've got some fruit, yeah, blueberries. I don't really like blueberries, but yeah, blueberries they slip down pretty well, and a little malt loaf and some bits and pieces.
Were you still feeling confident, or in those last sort of like 25 like miles, 10 miles, stuff like that, was there any kind of doubt in your mind? Were you feeling positive, or is it still too much of a haze to really know?
I definitely knew I was going to finish. My various goals were gradually going out of the window, and I think my C goal sub 14 or a course record that was looking a little bit iffy at times. But my real savior was 19 kilometers to go. There was Mike Butcher, who was the cross-country captain at Imperial. Really, really strong veteran marathon runner. He's a 2:30 marathon runner. He just randomly decided he was just going to come and tag along with me. And I was like, oh, Mike, this is a surprise. It's like, oh, yeah. It's like, how long are you with me? As long as you want. Right, you're with me to the end, mate. And he had a completely
found someone fast enough to pace you.
And he's a fast guy on fresh legs.
Yeah.
So I'd run like 78 miles at this point, and he was completely fresh. And he just had this constant pep talk all the way in. And
you think that made the difference? You think that made the difference?
Sorry?
Do you think that made the difference between your seat roll and
I think he probably knocked 15 minutes off my time.
Right.
And talking to him afterwards, digesting what had gone on, analysis. One of the interesting things he said was when he first met me, I was in control of the walking break. So I was taking the old walking break now and then. And towards the end, the walking breaks were in control of me.
See, that's such a good insight. That is such a good insight.
Without him now, I would have been completely oblivious to that.
That's why the pace is so important. Like when Lorna paces you, she's like, you literally do not let it walk for too long. You're like, you've got 1 minute to walk, and then we carry on with 1 minute to walk. Because if you were left to your own devices, you just end up walking most of it and not really realizing or anything else like that. So,
and he was very much right. No, that's enough walking. I was like, no, we're walking. But then we got onto the tarmac we got onto the proper surface. We got out of the muddy bits towards it, and there were some muddy bits. One thing I'd read quite carefully is previous race reports on the Centurion about the Thames path. There was one guy, Craig Holgate, I can't remember, quite a few years ago. I think he was on course to break 14, and he'd taken a wrong turning with like 8 miles to go or something, and he'd got himself. It's a very I know the turning actually. The course. It's like, why aren't we taking that lovely bit of tarmac? Why are we taking this sharp right hand onto this mud? If you'd taken the left, you would have got yourself the wrong side of a railway line, and you would have lost half an hour getting lost, which is exactly what he'd done. So I was acutely aware that I didn't want to take any wrong turnings. But
surprisingly easy on the Thames path. Everyone goes over, it's easy. You just stick next to the Thames, but incredibly easy to cross over somewhere and be on the wrong side at the wrong time. And it's not. You've really got to have your wits about you.
Oh yes, yeah. The amount of time it's not the obvious path next to the Thames is quite considerable.
And Dan Lawson, didn't Dan Lawson get lost a couple of times as well?
There was the guy who came second. I can't remember his name. He took a. I assume it's all accidental. He took a shortcut. He went up a road to get. Was it to get to Goring or a next checkpoint? He'd taken a slight shortcut, and Dan I think went a little way up that road and then doubled back and then took the right route. Um, Someone said they reckon that was worth about 6 minutes in terms of time wasted, stroke time gained. Um, you got to expect that a little bit of navigational issues will be there. You can't penalise people for accidentally missing a turn, and you'd be there. I don't think I took any wrong turns, but there was one bit where there was some construction work, so you had to go slightly beyond. You went over a bridge and then you turned right, but you had to go all the way around this construction to get back onto the path. And you're looking back at the track, some people took that a little bit shorter than others.
Aggressive cornering.
Aggressive cornering on
Aggressive
100 miles.
cornering, and you never know who's going to be looking at your Strava or looking at the tracking. Oh, hang on a minute, he's taking a bit of a,
I know
bit of a cheeky line there.
There's one person looking at your Strava all the time, just in case. But no, so that kind of takes us up to the point. We'll talk about the finish and the press ups in a minute, or lack of press ups in a minute. But for you, Lorna, last sort of 25 miles, last 10 miles, when Dom came, started pacing you, how were kind of you feeling? And I think by that time a couple of the female runners had dropped out. And kind of how kind of much updated was Dom keeping you in terms of where the other runners were and everything? Kind of how did you feel? What was your mindset?
I was really struggling with my legs by 50 miles. I knew from 30 that I had overcooked it and that I was pretty much done. By the time I got to Goring, it was starting to feel a little bit like Bambi on ice. My legs just weren't doing what I was asking them to do, and they were kind of flailing about hopelessly.
But what kind of speed were you doing at that time?
Terrible. Yeah, no, nothing to write home about at all. Haven't got a clue, but it really wasn't what I had anticipated at all. I was already down to lots of walk breaks, and I was jogging. But it was really not comfortable at all. And my legs had started to every now and again just give way when I was running. So it was all quad based because I always have my injuries at the back of my legs, hamstrings, glutes. I'd had to change my running style a little bit to be a lot more quad dominant and a lot shorter strides. And there's a lot of things in my training that I could have done that would have made me a lot better for this race. One of them would have been gym work, which I've always known, we all know, and nearly none of us do it. And
we'll come back to that. We'll come back to what you think would have improved your race, or what you would do differently next time.
So by the time I'd gotten to 22 miles to go, Dom picked me up and he gave me a nice pep talk, and I was already done. By then. I said to him, "Welcome to ultra running. We're going to go for a very long walk." And we did. He said to me that I was doing some running, but I genuinely don't remember that. My mind, I was desperate to run. I was not out, I wasn't done. I absolutely wanted to run it to the best of my ability, and the will was there, but unfortunately physically my legs just told me to fuck off every single time I tried to run.
And was it kind of you were feeling heavy, or were you in pain? Is that what
I was in pain. I was in pain. I was in a lot of pain. My legs just kept on giving way randomly and periodically, and the longer that we went, the more often that it went like that. And so every time I I would start running again, all of a sudden my legs would sort of go. And I just had in my mind the horrible visions of London Marathon, where you just see all of these people, they turn round that last corner and then their legs start giving up and they start wobbling to the finish, and they're just, you know, like a stack of potatoes towards the end, and then people scoop them up and run with them to the line and stuff. I was like, oh my god, this is me for 22 miles.
And then was the next one, were they reducing their time on you each time?
Yeah, unfortunately so, and it was absolutely no more than I deserved. She actually, I mean, the women in the race, the lady who came second, Melissa, she had a fantastic race, and she showed, if you look at her splits, she was really even. She went out at, like, basically ran 10.5, 11-minute miles all day until the very end, where unfortunately, where it got really muddy after Abingdon, the last 9 miles were basically unrunnable by the time we got there. And it's just sheer luck that happened, because I couldn't run. And so that unrunnable bit became unrunnable for her when she could have run it, whereas I couldn't, and it just played into my hands. And if she had come past me, it would have been no more than I had deserved. And I kind of made my peace with it. And Dom said, that's nonsense. You hadn't. You would have been devastated if she had come past you at the end of all of that. And of course I would have done, because I spent all day knowing full well that I was in the lead. Like, you go past and people say, oh, first woman or whatever. And at the start I was thinking, yeah, I am the first woman, but I started first. You know, I think that I may have gone past 1 or 2 women right at the start, but just like Richard, I wanted to start early because I didn't want to be running around in the dark for hours. So I did start early, and you can't really tell what's going on when people are all starting at different times. So, but it got more into the day, and I knew that I was first, obviously. And then in the last few miles, Dom is having heart palpitations because he's looking on this bloody app.
Oh my goodness, I can imagine.
And he's got the tracking, and he can see that she's coming up and she's coming up, you know. But there's that time difference there of when we started, so it's just not that easy to see how close she is. And with 2 miles to go, you hit the tarmac again, basically, and you just run right in, pretty much into the centre of Oxford. And he's given me these spectacular pep talks. On any other given day, I would have turned me into Linford Christie. But on that day, it was just like, yeah, I'm really gonna walk a little bit more because it was just, I just had nothing. And we got to the finish.
Yeah, how did it feel then to cross the finish line?
Well, I've never ever visualized myself not being able to run across the line. Anyone that has run with me on like a training run or whatever, I've got a really annoying habit of, if we're running to the car to finish, I will run to the car to finish, because I've always had in my head that London Marathon thing where, you know, you can see that people have checked out, they've seen the finish line and they've given up, you know, they've seen it, and that's the end, and then they get scooped up by their mates at the last minute and hauled across the line. And I've always had that thing, don't be that person, run through the finish line, you know, run to the finish. So I've never thought I wouldn't be able to run across the finish line, but I have just basically walked for 22 miles, and I'm not going to break the habit of a lifetime. So I go to run across this bloody line, and everyone's got the cowbells and they're wooing, and it's all this brilliant. And there's this like taped bit with a metal stake, and I go to run around the stake, and I'm like, right, you go to that stake and then you start running, and it's like, I don't know, 20 meters or something. You can do this, you can really do this. And I go round this stake, go to run, my legs collapse underneath me, and the only reason that I didn't end up on the floor was because my bad boy running buff that was around my wrist got stuck on the metal post and it kept me up. I can't believe how lucky I was. And I just managed to like pull this bloody buff off of this metal stake, and then I just sort of wobbled to the finish line and kind of just staggered over it, and then that was it. I had finished, and I was just so glad to have finished and not to have fallen over once.
So talking about falling over, or looking like it. So how did you feel when you finished, Richard? Like, was it kind of relief? I mean, we've seen the video of you. We didn't see the video of you finishing. We saw the video of you finishing, Richard, and you really did look like you've left it all out on there, and then you went down for the press ups.
Yes, so
Which I think confused a lot of people.
confused myself, I think. So I just going back to how pace was and things. I've done a bit of you. If you look back at the results, you can see where you are at each of the checkpoints, and I was the first all the way along. What that doesn't tell you is your pace between the different checkpoints. You only know how quick you were up to the first one. Then you need to do a bit of analysis. So obviously I've done some spreadsheets after the race as well. So that's part of a bit of closure to work out where I was fast and where I was slow. And interestingly, after I'd had my bonk between Henley and Reading, I wasn't the fastest. I was second.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then second again, Reading to Pangbourne. Then I was quickest Pangbourne to Wallingford. Then I was third, Wallingford to Clifton Hampden. Then fifth fastest between Clifton Hampden and Abingdon. And then Abingdon's like 9 miles to go. So I picked up my pace and not far before Abingdon. And then I was back on. I was the quickest all the way in. But yeah, as soon as we hit the tarmac, Mike was like, right, you got 2 miles. You can do this. You can do this. And it was like, he was pretty much giving me a countdown. And apparently my stride was good. My turnover was good, but my stride length was just very, very short.
Right.
So I was going for it. I was trying hard, but my legs were just not really complying. And yeah, it was very much a relief. It's like, there's the finish line. Yep. I'm freaking glad of that. And it was like, right, I can't let myself down. I can't let the club down. I am wearing bad boy running vest, but you've all guilt tripped me into wearing it. So
guilt tripping you into doing it.
Because it's not my fastest vest.
It's not your
took a weight penalty on the vest for the club.
Your running club, your road running club, doesn't give a shit about ultramarathons.
You make a very good point, Lorna. Yep, Lorna very much put it out there that this was my ultra club, and I owe all my success to you guys. And obviously traditional press ups is like, right, okay, right, let's do some press ups. It's like, right. I was down. I couldn't even get into a plank position. The legs just weren't. So I was on the ground. It was like, yeah, I need to get my legs out.
It really did look like the intention was there. The thing is, like, it's not as if you went down and pretended to not do it. You genuinely look like you just couldn't do anything.
I genuinely couldn't do it. Yeah, the intention was there. The ability was not. I'm not saying, I don't really have any muscles above the waist, so I'm not sure if my arms would have been able to produce them, but I couldn't even do a plank. So I was like, and then just toppled over to one side. Lay on the ground for a bit. So like, this is a lot easier than trying to do press ups.
So obviously, we've seen the aftermath of it with your trophies and everything else that you've got, and there's kind of lots that you've written about and you talked about your experience and stuff like that. What's been the kind of the aftermath for you then, in terms of the effect that it had on your body? Is there anything that you for you especially, Richard, you've never done a 100-miler, you've never run probably that amount of distance in that amount of time. How did your body feel in the kind of the days afterwards, and kind of was it like
it's funny, what I've discovered is that recovery isn't necessarily fully related to the distance that you've run. I recover very quickly after the Capital Ring. Less than, I think I did the Capital Ring on the Wednesday or Thursday. I did a group run with my daughter in the buggy 4 days later.
Yeah.
And I know that running with the buggy is roughly a 20 beats a minute heart rate penalty. It's harder. So I recover very quickly from that. Whereas when I did the Ross Barkley 5K, which was the start, run a 5K as quickly as you can. I did basically I did 10K, a 5K downhill, sprinting downhill, and 5K basically walking back uphill. That took about 2 weeks before I could walk normally.
Oh, really?
So that was 11 minutes of running that turned me into an utter cripple.
Wow. Okay.
Whereas 10 and a quarter hours of solid, steady, brisk but steady running, I was fine within less than a week. Thames Path, it was 2 days of clinging onto the banisters going up and down the stairs.
Yeah.
Fortunately, my daughter she's 2 today actually, so she can manage the stairs, not unsupervised but unaided, which is lucky because I could just about carry her and walk, but I couldn't carry her up or down stairs. And I wasn't going out running. I actually had my COVID jab on Tuesday, and it was a mile to walk to where I was having it. I think that actually did me the world of good.
Yeah.
Walking 2 miles. That was in the morning, and then in the afternoon the doorbell rang. I work in the loft, and I trotted downstairs without even thinking about it. I was like, oh, hang on, I can do the stairs again. Oh, this is awesome. So from Tuesday, I was feeling normal. Obviously not to the point of wanting to go out running. So yeah, I didn't go out running till for a week. I think I went out Monday morning. Yeah, yesterday morning I went out for a 10 miler, a steady 10 miler with a friend.
Is that the first one that you've done? You've done nothing and then you've done 10 miles?
Yeah, just a steady 10 miles.
Oh, for God's sake.
My knee hurt a bit actually afterwards, so maybe I'll wait a couple of days before I go out again. I'm not in any rush to get back into training, because I do think you do need a physical break and also the mental break as well. I think to go back into a training plan for something, you need to be motivated. You need to want to do it. If you just get ground down by it, regardless of whether you're physically able to do it, if you don't want to do it, you're not going to do it.
And so, just let's carry this through to the next conclusion. Do you obviously you put a stake in the ground with that performance, put yourself on the map in terms of ultras and everything else like that. At this point, what do you see as the next goal if you want to take it on?
Well, I exchanged an email with James Elson. I said, thanks, it was a fantastic race.
Thanks, that was easy. Formality. Yeah. Is that the best you can do?
and he has said, well, can I interest you in the track 100 next year? And actually, the guy who I bumped into at Hampton Court, who ran with me a couple of miles, he's done a track 24-hour race. And I'm slightly curious about the long track races. I'm not sure mentally, going round and round in circles for that amount of time, whether that's going to be harder than running across undulating rough terrain. I'm not sure.
I think, Richard, having I witnessed the track 100, I crewed Mike and he did really well. I think that it would be right up your street, and I think you would really excel on it. I think you might think that it would be boring, but actually it's all about the numbers, and you like the numbers. It is all about the organisation. It is broken down into 400 metres at a time, and it is like when I've been out to crew and pace other things, point to points or whatever, you see people every couple of hours. You're seeing them every 8 miles or 10 miles or whatever. The track 100 is the most frantic event that I've ever been to, because they just keep coming and coming and coming. It is just every, and it's like, if you can run, like the people that can be a metronome, who can set the pace and just keep going, it's right up their street, and you know exactly what you're doing. You're really in tune with your paces or whatever. I would love to witness you on the track. I think that it would be something.
Running club has decided for you.
Yeah, and you have to wear your bloody vest.
So that's a possibility. So if London continues to be in October, then London could be my marathon focus, and possibly an ultra towards the start of the year. What I find hilarious is the fact that James is talking about Zach Bitter and Alex Sorokin coming, and he puts me in the same category. So, well, hang on 1 minute. You're talking about proper athletes with credibility and proven track record, and I've just sort of come into this and fallen very far short of my own goals. To be even in the same category I think is hilarious.
It was only your first 100 miler, that you are allowed to improve afterwards.
Well, having said that if I got my nutrition right, then I think I could knock off a significant amount of time from that. I don't think the conditions were amazingly fast.
I don't think on a track they're going to spread it with 9 miles of mud in the last couple of hours of it. So I think that may make a massive difference as well.
So that's a possibility. I don't want to lose my speed. So I would like to try and aim for a sub 220 marathon in London. I know that is far from a formality. I've seen some very, very good runners try incredibly hard and fall ever so slightly short. Runners which I think are probably better runners than I am. So I may be setting my sights a little bit high there, but that's one of my goals.
That won't be in a BBRC best, though, will it?
Possibly not.
Amazing. So for you, Lorna, how did you cope physically after in the kind of the days and weeks afterwards?
Terrible. Obviously, I had done something quite awful to my quads. But all of my normal injuries that I was worried were going to be the reason why I would have to pull out, if there were a reason, I thought it would be hamstrings or glutes. Never felt a twinge on any of those. It was just quads all along. Yeah. Normally when you've done yourself in or whatever, you're really stiff. It's bad the next day, but it is worse on the second day. The second day after the hard run, that is when you are your absolute stiffest, and then it gets progressively better. Well, I went for a meal in Oxford afterwards with Ali and Dom, and I struggled to cross the road in time in front of the cars and things like that, because I was just so stiff. And that was the Sunday, and I'd had a bit of a moment in the room, because just as Dom had gone out, I decided to go to my bag to pack my bags, and my legs had done what they were trying to do all the night before, which would completely give way, and I just ended up like a sack of shit on the floor. And then, of course, we've got to try and get
I'm a winner. You're lying there. I'm a winner, by the way.
Like,
I'm a winner. I'm a champion.
if people want to know what the price of like the trophy is, it's that
Your
basically.
dignity.
But
Absolutely
but
your
on the
dignity.
second day, when I was expecting it to be even worse, actually it was getting better. And then I realised that actually it wasn't my second day, because I was counting, you know, the Monday as being the first day of stiffness, but actually, unfortunately, the race day was my first day of stiffness. And so come 2 days after that, I was already starting to get better. But actually, I've only just got my dignity back now, because I can get off of the toilet without hauling myself up using the handrail or pushing myself off of the seat. And that thankfully happened 2 days ago. And then yesterday was my first day of being able to make both upstairs and downstairs with no hands. So, I mean, we're talking a good week.
Well, one of my biggest challenges, we have a floor bed because our daughter's in with us, so it's basically a mattress on the floor. So getting up off a very low bed has been a challenge. It's sort of looking for things to cling on to. What I've found is actually been my stomach has taken a lot longer to feel normal. I had about 4 days before I had a normal appetite. And I was very close to spewing in Dan's car on the way home. He had to do an emergency stop on the M40 to stop him inside of his car, getting all completely covered in chocolate milk and fruit.
That's really funny you should say that, because my stomach was absolutely fine throughout the whole race, and I was absolutely chock-a-block full of Morton and flapjacks, and I felt fine. And then nothing's ever going to stop me from eating in the days afterwards, because I just love my food and didn't eat a good bit of food at all. It was all absolute crap. It was just, you know, thousands of calories worth of cake and things like that. I'd love to say that I was targeting protein and looking for recovery and stuff, but no, none of that. But on Tuesday, randomly, I really wasn't feeling very well, and I did have a little bit of a vomiting episode for absolutely no reason whatsoever. And I have just been incredibly hot. My quads in particular, where I've obviously done damage to them, have just been red hot. And every night in bed in particular, I'm just sweating through the sheets. I really don't know quite what that's all about. And you've just had your COVID jab, and I had to put mine off actually, because they asked, I got the text last week saying book up, and I was thinking, oh, it's going to be like weeks, so I'll look at what they're offering me, and they're offering me in 2 days time. I was like, no way. I am absolutely categorically not having the jab when I feel like this. It would probably give me COVID or something. I was just, no way.
Well, I could have had my jab before the race, but I planned it to have it just after.
So for you, Lorna, what comes next? Have you got in mind what you're going to do? You know, how do you build on this champion status, 100-miler winner status?
Naturally, I did the I'm never doing that ever again thing, and I did truly mean it at the time. And
then a minute later, you crossed the finish line, and then you're already planning the next one.
No, I said it for a couple of days, absolutely, you know, not doing that ever again. And truly, my hat comes off to people that do that multiple times. You know, it's normalised by so many people in our club and in our circle of friends.
You know, you wish you'd entered the Grand Slam, don't you?
Absolutely not.
You have to win the Grand Slam next. That's
yeah. I mean,
I'm sure if you spoke to James nicely, he could squeeze you in.
Should we sort it? Should we get James? James will get you into the Grand Slam if that's what
no,
you want.
No, he wouldn't. James doesn't know who I am, and he doesn't care.
I'm getting a bit of FOMO actually with the North Downs Way 50 on this weekend. I was like, well, could I email James? Could I?
So do you have any goal next?
Yeah. Yes, I do. Look, I've got next year. I am going to be test piloting the Run Britannia route for Rat Race, which is basically Land's End to John O'Groats with lots of really nice diversions to make it longer and more beautiful, because we're not going to be running straight up the side of a bloody motorway or something.
And you're going to win that.
That's
You're planning to win that.
People don't win these things, no, but it's a month-long, multi-day thing that I'm really looking forward to. It's terrifying. I'm going to need to do an awful lot of training to make sure that I'm strong enough for, not mentally, because despite the fact that it's many days of really long running, it's not the mental aspect that I worry about. I really worry about my injuries. I need to make sure that I'm strong.
I worry about the other people taking part, because apparently there are some incredible athletes doing it.
There are some incredible athletes, Jody. There absolutely are. And it's going to be brilliant. It's going to mean different things to different people. But I'm so looking forward to it. And I don't want to do anything to jeopardize being in the right shape for that. Having said that, I will never do another 100-miler. I have spent an awful long time thinking about this race in the lead up to it, getting ready for it and everything. And I said to my friend Kirsten, I said, I just want to finish this race so that I never have to think about it again.
What is it?
And of course, since I've finished this race, the only thing I've thought about is that flipping race and what I could do better the next time. And I just have this horrible sinking feeling that I'm going to enter it again, to right the wrongs.
So this is a perfect opportunity then. So let's not take too much time about this. I want you to come up. What were if you were going to do this again?
Yeah.
What would be kind of like top 3 learnings, top 3 things that you'd change, that you think would make a massive difference to your performance?
The gym. I absolutely, there's no way of getting around the fact that I have to really significantly do strength training. I've been putting it off for 6 years. And I can't do that anymore. I have to do the gym. I have to work on the pacing, but I have to decide what that actually means, because I'm still reasonably confident that I should be able to run, okay, not as fast as what I took it out at this time. That was just pure nonsense, and I've been humbled by that, and I've been taught a lesson. But I don't believe that I need to be going out at 11-minute miles or 10-minute miles. I think that there is a happy medium in there where I could have done, even in my training, I was doing that speed for a lot longer than I did on the day, and I don't think it was necessarily my day. But I would like to do a lot of training at the kind of race pace that I was looking for. Maybe that's something that I would do. And the third one, what would be the third one? Well, actually, do you know, I would get my tech right, because I fiddled with my watch beforehand and managed to make it so it was basically useless to me. So I would make sure that I could actually use the technology that I was taking with me. It was very good for the maps, and I didn't go wrong once, and that was because Dom had got me some little cue cards and I had got it on my watch, but unfortunately it rendered the actual distance and pace and time element of my watch absolutely useless, and that's basically what I wanted to know. So I would use my tech better.
Okay, and what about you, Richard? If you had to pick sort of three things that you'd change if you did it again?
I'd pull off all my toenails in advance as opposed to waiting until afterwards. Because six toenails came off, and I only have 8 at the best of times. So no, obviously training with food. That's got to be the key thing. If I get my nutrition right, I think that's certainly the low hanging fruit for me. get that right, I'm sure I could see some significant improvements. Obviously, I would slow down, but I don't think I would have the massive crashes. I don't think I would slow down anywhere near as much. I think I would still come into halfway feeling strong. Should probably point out, I think I came into Henley 6 hours 8 minutes. So I was only 5 minutes slower on the first 50 miles than I was on the South Downs Way. Obviously on a flat course. Apart from that, crewing was. But I think I might take two proper paces. I think they were. Mike was an absolute godsend, an unexpected one. And if I knew in advance that I was picking up some quick guys who would properly carry me through, that I must admit I did think of pace as a bit of a who needs a pacer? That's a bit of a crutch. You're soft if you need a pacer, but then having had the advantage of one, they are massive. So I might look to take a couple of paces if I was doing it again.
It's different. It's really hard to do because I've never done a 100-mile without a pacer, and so the thought of it, I'd like to try it without a pacer to just see what it's like not having that there, because I can't describe like the last 20 miles just getting through that without someone there in any capacity, no matter how fast you're running or not running. It's still an incredibly difficult thing to do.
Now, of course, if you are looking to run fast, your available pool of pacers is significantly smaller.
Yeah.
You would need to make sure that whoever was pacing you was going to be comfortable running a 3-hour marathon with kit and stuff off on trail. How many and people who are capable of running that speed, are they necessarily wanting to be giving up time to do that? But at the same time, I think partly one of the reasons that Dan was happy to, I'm sure Dan would have offered his time anyway, but to be part of something that was going to be possibly a bit special, knowing that I had lofty goals and he could be a key part of achieving those. I think he was quite keen to be part of that. So
entirely central, I think his words were. Entirely central.
So yeah, a couple of paces, nutrition. Third, this is silly because I've been working on, because Garmin's are ridiculous. Chorus have come out with a watch that absolutely pisses all over Garmin in terms of battery life. Garmin's are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The X is like the size of the moon on your wrist. Why is Garmin battery life so rubbish? I had tried to make sure I turned off Bluetooth while I wasn't carrying a Bluetooth phone or anything. Smart recording and wrist HR was all off. I tried to optimize my battery life as much as possible. It still died 145k in. And I'd actually been working on a little puck with a built-in battery, various bit of 3D printing and little lithium-ion cells, but I just hadn't got round to finishing it.
Jesus.
But I suppose I could just buy a Chorus watch, and that might be the easier option.
So tech. So basically tech again. It comes down to tech in the end. That's the tech letting you down.
Well, it didn't let me down because I still had my backup cycle incubator in my pocket. That was a 70-gram penalty, which I thought was worth it. So it is all on Strava, but it doesn't have cadence data and HR data and stuff, which would have been very interesting to look back on. There isn't a third obvious thing, but yeah, a pacer and nutrition are certainly the weather. Picking better weather, maybe.
You can only do that if you're Killian. If you're Killian, you can choose the date, the time, the course, whatever you want. I think you might be a few years off that yet, but yeah, I think that makes a massive difference.
But I did finish.
You did finish, yes.
Venga!
Well,
I mean,
well,
I know
I think
that, Jody, I want to take over your interview a little bit, because we were going on about this being my first 100, and it's also Richard's first 100, and obviously we've had slightly different days of it, but ultimately the same outcome, because we've both got fantastic trophies, and there are a lot of similarities between um, our running preparation and ethos in a way. But I really wanted to let people know that there are many, many ways of running 100 miles, and there's many, many reasons for doing it as well. You know, I'm horribly competitive with myself, and I will always go and do a race, and to the very best of my ability or whatever, and maybe that doesn't look like much fun to a lot of people, and I can absolutely see how that would be the case. And equally, we've got a lot of friends that turn out really good performances, like multiple 100 milers. I'm thinking of Ali, I'm thinking of Julius, and people that have truly inspired me from the group. I couldn't have done this run without Ali, and her allowing me to go on so many of her races with her in either a pacing or crewing capacity. And we talk all the time, obviously, about running and stuff, and she very kindly phoned me whilst we were en route to the race saying, look, this is your first 100 miler. I don't want you to ruin it and not enjoy it by going out too fast and getting too competitive. And I said, yes, Ali, I won't do that. I won't do that. And of course, I did do exactly that. And she knew full well I was going to do that sort of nonsense. But I finished the race, and I had so many messages on social media from people saying well done, saying, oh, it was a truly inspirational race or whatever. Women in particular want to be able to see that people, other people that look like them, or, women or whatever, can do these things. And I really want everybody to know that anybody can do 100 miles. It might not look like Richard's, and it might not look like mine, and you can't just go and think that you will finish it having put in no preparation whatsoever. But anybody can, with a concerted effort and a focus on training, anybody can do it. But you have to want to finish, because it gets really dark out there and really painful. I couldn't have done it without the group and the friends that I've got along the way, and people have popped up at various stages of my running career, whether it be the first group after my first marathon or the podcast group afterwards. So you need to have your mates around to give you that little bit of a boost. And I'm sure Richard is the same, because you've got your running club, and your mate popped up just at the right time, didn't he? So you can't necessarily do it alone.
Well, that just goes to show that people were watching, and people cared enough to come out. But it's funny, people say, "Oh, enjoy your race." I sometimes use this analogy. Well, if you're enjoying it, you're not going hard enough.
Yeah.
But it's a fine line. It's if you're not enjoying it, why are you doing it? Whereas if you're racing, you're trying to go as fast as possible, and that hurts. And I often think about racing as being pain management. You're on the very edge of it's hurting. Can I go harder? Probably not.
I totally agree. I after the race, people say that thing, oh, it's type 2 fun or type 1 fun or whatever, and I've never understood what that meant. And I thought, do you know what? I really should actually Google this, these different types of fun, And we're well and truly in the type 2 fun, you and I, which is not liking it at all at the time, but thoroughly enjoying the outcome and looking back on it and enjoying what you have achieved, you know.
Of course, the shorter the race, the less time you're enduring, and the more time you can enjoy afterwards. When it's a race 100 miles, that's a long time to be in the pain cave.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But I mean, I didn't enjoy all of the race at the time, but actually the will was always there, and I desperately wanted to finish. And I knew that I could finish, even though I was in a terrible state in many ways. My brain hadn't gone, you know, it was just my legs, and I really wanted to finish. I also just had this horrible thought that after James had mentioned that you might have some fireworks, I'm just thinking for 22 miles, oh my God, what is he going to say about me? I've gone off like an absolute prat, and I'm now spending 20 miles walking at the end. Like, these are my fireworks. What is he going to say in the end of race report, you know? And I was just thinking, oh, I'm just going to be so embarrassed. And of course, no one cares. No one cares at all.
We all care. We all care.
No, I mean, it's lovely, and I've had some fantastic messages and stuff, but ultimately it is still just a race, and I haven't.
You're doing it down. You're doing it down a little bit. You're doing it down a little bit. Have you, Richard? Have you received any positive messages from some of your previous detractors in any way?
Even I got a positive message from you, of all people. That was the most surprising one.
Well, the thing is, I'm not a big fan of dot watching. I think it's, you know, we keep, you know, Hellard really loves it. Other people really love it, and I'm just, you know, I'm not interested in races generally. But I think watching you both and feeling properly invested in it, especially as, you know, we've been giving you, like, ribbing you and been building up to and everything, and it was genuinely exciting. It was genuinely, you know, like seeing that where you were in different places and seeing where there were people catching you and everything that was going on with the you know, on the site and everything, and on the Facebook group. It was you know, to feel like we had like our friends out there racing and, you know, achieving that, and, you know, where are you going to slow down? Are you going to hit that point? You know, over 100 miles. You know, over 100 miles. That's a long time. That's a lot. There's a lot of time to be invested in something, to keep coming back and checking it. And I think that was it. And it was properly exciting, and it was an incredible result in the end. Not least the fact that we got someone BBRC first and someone BBRC last as well, which I think is just, if anything is an advert for how good a club is in terms of the spread of runners it has in it, that is probably the most perfect.
Yeah, Neil was dead last, wasn't he? Which I think is fantastic, and we can sort of dangle the club a little bit here and the exclusive content that we provide to our club members. But I do a Facebook live with into the group every week, and I have obviously interviewed Richard a couple of times, asking him all the hints and tips for this race, and, you know, about all of the running that he has done. And I've also interviewed Jody, who was desperate to not come on, and but basically pulled out 2 or 3 times before I managed to shoehorn him onto this flipping podcast. So, well, extra bit of exclusive content, shall I say. But one of my questions to Jody at the time was, do you think that the Bad Boy Running podcast has been a success? And he said yes, and not just because of the actual podcast, but more so the community that has been created from it. And I think that this race has truly shown the community spirit of the pod and of the club, and I've truly never been prouder of our club. and what we, have achieved with the club and with the podcast. And I think that this race has really shown that. I mean, obviously we all have to be embarrassed about how good Richard is, and he's showing us all up.
We're showing the power of the club and to be able to do all these things, but the power of the club would be able to bully Richard into wearing a different top and possibly upsetting his very, very sort of specific plans, just so. Yeah. And I've noticed that you're wearing your Iron Man t-shirt.
That was just for your benefit.
Yeah. I absolutely knew it. I knew it. Okay,
I'm World Championships, not just any old Iron Man.
Well, it's half an Iron. It's a half Iron Man. It's not a real one, is it? That's the thing. This has been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing everything. Going into detail around it and everything. And I think people are going to find this really useful. People are going to find this really interesting. If you want to hear more from Lorna and hear more from Richard as well. Like Lorna said, joining Bad Boy Running Club, not only do we have incredible merch, surprising merch as well. Incredible might not be the word, but surprising merch that you won't get in any other running club. But again, that was that thing, in the Facebook group, Lorna broadcasts pretty much every Monday, but also interviews the breadth of runners that we have. Richard talking about all the different things that he's done and how he's come, talking to lots of different runners, getting all different views from around the country and from around the world as well. And so there's if you really want to sort of up your game and you don't want to go to a running club because we know what they're full of, then joining Bad Boy Running Club is probably the best thing to do, legendary status or otherwise. So good, I might even join it myself.
One day you could actually pay your fees.
One day I will pay the fee and do it. But I just want to say thank you very much, both of you, for being on the quad. It was great to get you on at last, Richard. You earned it. Well done. If you beat the world record, we might have you back on again to talk about that. And Lorna, thank you very much. You are incredibly inspirational, as much as you don't want to hear that. But I'm sure lots of people will be reaching out to you after this podcast to get your take on things anyway. So thank you very much, and
thank you,
see you later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.